excuses not reading. Is it ready? It's you guys ready? Yes, sir. Good evening. Please let me call to order the Bristol, Tennessee City Council meeting of June 27, 2022. Mary Lee, would you please call the roll?
Yes, sir. Powers.
Here.
Lettrell.
Here.
Turner. Fireroman.
Here.
Patton.
Here. I would like to welcome everyone and thank you for attending tonight's meeting. Your interest in city government is very much appreciated. There are a number of opportunities to speak on matters of city business this evening. A sheet, a sheet explaining those opportunities has been made available to you when entering the meeting room. As we go forward with tonight's agenda, I will note each time when public comment is welcome. In addition, a sign-up sheet has been provided as you enter the council chambers for those individuals desiring to address City Council during the Appearance of Citizens section of our agenda. I would like to ask Fire Chief Mike Carrier to lead us in our invocation, and following our invocation, I will lead us in the pledge.
Shall we pray? Our most kind and gracious Heavenly Father, as we come before you tonight, we just thank you, Lord, for all your many blessings. Lord, we thank you for your Son, Jesus Christ, and the sacrifice he made for us. We thank you, Lord, for the fact that we live in a country that gives us the freedoms that we have to come together in assemblies like this and be able to conduct business. And I pray, dear God, that you would help us to never forget all those who have made sacrifices down through the years to make this possible. As we come before you tonight, Lord, as we open this city council meeting, a scripture comes to mind from 1 Kings. And in that scripture, King Solomon, as he took the reins from his father, he had the opportunity to ask you for anything that he wanted. He could have asked you for material things. He could have asked you for long life. He could have asked you for the lives of his enemies, but he didn't. He chose to ask you for wisdom. He asked you for wisdom to be able to discern good from wrong, to be able to discern what was just, and to be able to govern his people, your people, in a way that would be pleasing to you. Tonight, Lord, I would ask for that same wisdom to be granted to this city council. And I thank you, Lord, for the fact that they are willing to serve, to be able to serve the public, to lead this city forward. And I would pray, Lord, that you would give them that wisdom to be able to discern good from bad, right from wrong, and be able to make decisions that will lead this city forward. And again, I thank you, Lord, for the opportunity to be in a city and be able to work in a city that is truly a good place to live, a good place to work, a good place to visit. And I pray you would be with us through this meeting tonight. In Jesus Christ's name, amen.
Mr. Sword, do you have any items to be added to the agenda this evening?
No, Mayor, the agenda is complete.
We have two proclamations and one recognition on tonight's agenda. First, we have a proclamation designating the month of June 2022 as Men's Health Month. I would like to ask Councilman Mark Hutton to read the proclamation. And I believe Mr. John King, Project Director of Tennessee Men's Health Network, is with us this evening to accept the proclamation.
It's a proclamation designating June 2022 as Men's Health Month. Whereas despite advances in medical technology and research, men continue to live an average of 5 years less than women, with Native American and African American men having the lowest life expectancy. And whereas educating the public and healthcare providers about the importance of a healthy lifestyle and early detection of male health problems will result in reducing rates of mortality from disease. And whereas men who are educated about the value that preventative health can play in prolonging their lifespan and their role as productive family members will be more likely to participate in health screenings. And whereas fathers who maintain a healthy lifestyle are role models for their children and have happier, healthier children. And whereas Men's Health Network worked with Congress to develop a national men's health awareness period as a special campaign to help educate men, boys, and their families about the importance of positive health attitudes and preventative health practices. And whereas Men's Health Month will focus on a broad range of men's health issues, including heart disease, diabetes, mental health, prostate, testicular, and colon cancer. And whereas the citizens of the city are encouraged to increase awareness of the importance of a healthy lifestyle regular exercise, and medical checkups. Now, therefore, the mayor of the city of Bristol, Tennessee, does hereby proclaim June 2022 as Men's Health Month and encourage all of our citizens to pursue preventative health practices and early detection efforts.
I would just like to thank the mayor, of course, and the city council for awarding us this proclamation in recognition for Men's Health Month and Men's Health Network of Tennessee, as myself, Mike Leventhal of Knoxville, and Jimmy Boyd from Washington, D.C. greatly appreciate the recognition.
Next, we have a proclamation designating the month of June 2022 as National Homeownership Month. I would like to ask Councilwoman Margaret Firerobin to read the proclamation. Mr. Steve Willinger, Chair of the Community Development Advisory Committee, is with us this evening to accept the proclamation.
Thank you. And I know this evening we have folks here with us who value their homes. There are also many people who look forward to having a home as well. And we know in today's economy that's getting a little more challenging than it has been in the recent past. Whereas throughout our nation's history, home ownership has been central to the American way of life. Home ownership plays a critical role in strengthening families and communities, and for those reasons, our nation has long promoted home ownership. Whereas since America's earliest days, home ownership has been creating community stakeholders who are active in charities and their places of worship and are more likely to vote and have become involved in local issues. Moreover, home ownership offers children a stable living environment and influences their development in measurable ways. Children of homeowners have higher student test scores, a higher rate of high school graduation, thereby higher earning potential, and are more likely to participate in organized activities. Quite simply, our nation is made stronger by the hardworking families and individuals who participate in the American dream of home ownership. And whereas home ownership also serves as the engine of social mobility and the pathway to prosperity. In fact, owning a home is a family's quickest and surest path to self-sufficiency and provides families with stability and security. Home ownership builds wealth over time, and in the long run, buying is more cost-effective than renting. In the past 15 years, the net worth of the typical homeowner has ranged between 31 and 46 times that of the net worth of the typical renter. And whereas the federal government and the state of Tennessee are working aggressively to make homeownership more affordable and more accessible and to ensure that the dream of home ownership is available to all Americans. The city of Bristol, Tennessee joins with the federal and state government in this mission. Now, therefore, the mayor of Bristol, Tennessee does hereby proclaim June 2022 as National Homeownership Month and asks all citizens within the city of Bristol to join in recognizing the importance of providing affordable housing and the opportunity for home ownership for all Americans this 7th day of June 2022. Thank you.
Hello, City Council people. Hey, I'm going to read this. I was just saying that Margaret kind of stole the thunder from my story, but maybe we'll do it anyway. All Americans should have the opportunity to achieve home ownership, the centerpiece of the American dream and pathway to economic well-being and intergenerational wealth building. Home ownership is a major source of generational wealth for many Americans. The link between financial security and home ownership is especially important today as inflation rises. But many people may not realize just how much owning a home contributes to your overall net worth. Homeownership is a building block for financial success. A 2021 National Association of Realtors report details the difference in the net worth between homeowners and renters. It finds the net worth of a homeowner was about $300,000, while that of a renter was around $8,000. To put that into perspective, the average homeowner net worth is roughly 40 times that of a renter. The gap between a homeowner's net worth and a renter shows how truly foundational home ownership is to wealth building. As a realtor and board member of the CDAC, I want to thank Bristol, Tennessee City Council, and our mayor for marking National Home Ownership Month with a proclamation affirming the importance of expanding access to safe, affordable housing. Thank you.
We have one item of recognition on tonight's agenda. The city has over 350 full and part-time employees that serve the community on a daily basis. We frequently hear of employees that go above and beyond in their service. To that end, the Bristol First program was developed to recognize their efforts, and tonight we honor our latest recipient of the Bristol First Award. And Ms. Ann Dunham will go over that with us tonight.
Good evening. Tonight's award recipient wears many hats in our city. Captain Darrell Mears is a firefighter and paramedic for the Bristol, Tennessee Fire Department. Additionally, he serves as Assistant Medical Director, overseeing the inventory of equipment and supplies on all city ambulances and taking a leadership role in establishing medical protocols used by our city's medical first responders. In 2020, he was instrumental in establishing the Advanced EMT Training Program within the Bristol, Tennessee Fire Department that last year was named a Healthcare Hero by the Tri-Cities Business Journal and has provided critical training to more than 24 EMTs in our region. He continues to serve as both program coordinator and lead educator for that program. The incident that led to tonight's award, however, occurred while he was off duty, spending the afternoon with his youngest daughter, Preslyn. The school day was over, and the two of them, father and daughter, were contemplating a trip to the Pinnacle to pick up some movie popcorn as a homework snack. Soon after they turned on Anderson Street, Preslyn spotted smoke. Both she and her dad initially suspected someone was burning brush in the neighborhood, but as a precaution, Captain Mears called the nearby fire station and asked the on-duty firefighters to look out the window. From that vantage point, it was obvious that the house was indeed on fire. With firefighters on the way, Captain Mears called 911 to officially report the incident, then instructed his daughter to wait in the truck while he investigated. Once he approached the home, he noticed a car in the driveway, an indication that someone might be home, and upon closer inspection, discovered a set of keys hanging in the door. He yelled out, pounded on the door, then pushed the door open to find a man lying on the floor in the hallway ahead. Although he knew emergency crews had already been dispatched, and the fact that he had no protective gear, Captain Mears ran into the house through heavy smoke and visible flames and pulled the man down the hall and safely onto the lawn, then administered aid until the ambulance arrived to transport him to the hospital. The Bristol First Award was created in 2014 to recognize city employees who go above and beyond the call of duty and meet certain award criteria. Captain Mears' actions on April 26 demonstrate a high level of service to the public and the ability to perform in an outstanding manner in an emergency situation. Therefore, it's my pleasure, upon the nomination of Fire Chief Mike Carrier, to present the Bristol First Award to Captain Darrell Mears of the Bristol Fire Department. before you sit down, as we noted, Captain Mears did not act alone. His teenage daughter, Preston, was with him, and in fact was the first to spot smoke billowing from the Anderson Street home. Her attention to detail and gut instinct that something wasn't quite right was the first step toward the actions that unfolded that day. So the city is proud to present her with a City Choice Award, signed by the mayor, to recognize her diligent attention and quick action on Tuesday, April 26th, to assist a community member in need. Presley, your willingness to come to the aid of others is an impressive quality in someone so young and serves as an inspiration to all of us. So we'd like you to come forward as well.
Distinguished Council and Mayor Lesher, we'd like to thank you ever so much for this award. I tell you, on that day, it was more so getting to the pinnacle to buy popcorn than anything. She's had a rough day at school. She had a lot of homework. She says, all I need to do is go to Pinnacle. She loves popcorn from the movie theater. We always go by Station 3 because that's her favorite station. All my girls have kind of lived with me at the fire department because we're a big family at the fire department. They can come and go. Anybody at the fire department can come and go because that's how we operate at the fire department. And it just so happened to be the good Lord put us in the right place at the right time. Everything just worked out, and it was just a matter of fact that Preston said, I think that house is on fire. I said, nah, that house is not on fire. They're just burning brush on the other side of it because that's what typically, since I see a lot of that stuff, I brush it off sometimes. But she was diligent enough to say, no, I think the house is actually on fire, Dad. I think it's on fire. It's like, okay. So I backed up, called the station, because it was right across the street. I didn't have a good vantage point, and I called the station. I said, hey, guys, look out your window. Is that house on fire? Then I got bleep, 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 bleep. Got to go, because I couldn't repeat what they said, So then I drove down Anderson Street, which is a one-way street, parked the truck, kind of told her to stay in the truck, and then I went and investigated, and, the house is actually on fire, flames coming out of the side, and, then my training started kicking in. And I'm for all this is the fact that I hope the city realizes what a wonderful fire department we have, and it wouldn't be just me. I think any one of our personnel that would be in the same situation would do exactly the same thing. And it's not just an award for me, it's definitely an award for my daughter because she was diligent enough to say, hey, look, we have to go check this out. And I was like, well, let's go get popcorn, but she did that. And I want to, thank her because she was so diligent in her observation. Because otherwise, the good Lord put us there. If you don't open your eyes, then you're not going to see it. So I want to thank Preston because she did a wonderful job, and I really appreciate that. Thank you for the award. Really appreciate it, and thank you for this evening.
Now, that's hard to beat. Next on our agenda, we will receive a presentation on our school system's proposed fiscal 2023 budget. Following the budget presentation, we will receive the school liaison report. And I believe Dr. Tudor and company.
Good evening, everyone. I think he's queuing that up. While he's queuing that up, I will just say I apologize that I was not in attendance at your work session to be there when Tara presented this information to you, but thank you for the opportunity to be here this evening and present. I've abbreviated it, so you're not going to get as much detail as what Tara presented to you, but thank you for the opportunity. And if you have any questions as I go along, please stop me. But I'm just here to present to you all this evening our 2023 budget. And so I'll just go through some high-level information. We have 5 elementary schools: Anderson, Avoca, Fairmount, Haynesfield, and Holston View. Of course, our 1 middle school, Tennessee Middle School. We have 1 traditional high school, Tennessee High, and 1 online high school, which is Tennessee Online Public School. We've been fortunate that this past year we expanded that, so that is now K-12 school, so no longer just a high school. Currently enrolled, this was in May. At the end of the year, essentially, we have about 3,800 students in K through 12, another 127 in pre-K, for a total of 3,970. The free and reduced lunch information, we have a roughly 35% reported, but as you'll recall, the past couple of years, because of COVID, the federal government has covered the cost of all meals, breakfast and lunch, for all students, regardless of their ability to pay. So we believe that number is a little bit low because our families stopped filling out the paperwork for aid. So we think that because we have to charge them this coming year again, that we'll see that number increase again, back to probably closer to 40 or 45%, which is typical for us as a district. This is difficult to see, but this is our total budget compared to 21 and 22. So our total on the far right-hand side, you can see our total budget amount is just shy of $43 million. And we have about almost $12.5 million in reserves. I'm sure Tara explained to you that sometimes the reserves is dependent upon capital projects. Most of those happen in the summer, and our fiscal year begins July 1. And so some of those roll over into different years. So that's probably more inflated than what that shows. We have 2 other funds, the Federal Projects Fund and School Nutrition Funds, and you can see those amounts there. They're kind of separate from general purpose, and our total expenditures are at the bottom of the page. This is the detail about that. So the first few slides I have are about revenues. The majority of our revenues really come from 2 primary sources: taxes and the state of Tennessee. And so this first part are taxes. So you can see the variety of taxes that we reap the benefits from. Mostly property tax and sales tax are the primary funders for us, but there's some other small amounts of taxes there. We draw a little bit of money for tuition for students attending our school district, and then we charge a little bit for fees, so those are smaller amount revenues. The biggest part of our funding revenue comes from the state of Tennessee. That's been known as the BEP, Basic Education Program. That's close to $18 million. And then you can see there are a variety of other grants and other sources of income that come from the state. Either we apply for those grant funds on a competitive basis, or we apply for them and it's sort of a given that we're going to receive them. I know we've talked a little bit about the new funding model coming next year. That's called TISA. Part of those grants that you see listed there, when we roll over into TISA, those will now be rolled into our funding model instead of us being separate and applying for them separately. So a little bit of different way to look at that, but close to $19.5 million comes from the state. We get a little bit of reimbursement from the federal government for our ROTC program. We also have some other smaller amounts. E-rate is what we get in reimbursement for our internet services and some cabling and those sorts of things, technology. Of course, the city of Bristol, Tennessee provides us an allocation, and then a federal projects funds transfer. So that's how we get to our total of $42,868. This is just a graphic representation so you can kind of see visually where the majority of our revenues come from. You can see, again, the state of Tennessee is the bulk of that. We have about 24% from federal. Sales tax and property tax amount to about 30%, and then our other smaller amounts with the city of Bristol, Tennessee on the side as well. From the expenditure side for this year, you can see that we have a little bit of an increase in salary and benefits. That's primarily because we chose this year to bring cleaning services in-house. So previously that had been a contracted service, contracted for about $1.2 million. We're bringing that on in-house, and we're actually budgeting about 1.6 or 1.7 million. You know as well as I do the increased costs in salaries and those sorts of things. We had to increase that a bit, so that's the increase in salaries and benefits. Our operating expenditures are listed there. capital projects, which we submit to you all, we've decreased that. The reason that 5.1 was so high last year is primarily because of the middle school. That was a big chunk of what that was allocated for. And then the debt payments back and forth, those are related to Fairmount and the ESG project. So that gets to we actually have a balanced budget, so we will not be operating in a deficit or have a surplus at this time. So the detail about that information in our budget for next year, we've included step increases for all our full and part-time folks. We've included a 2% cost of living increase for everyone as well. And so that total amount comes to a little over $32.5 million. Benefits are included in all of that. You can see the detail about some of our retirement information decreased depending on which staff member you were, and some of it increased. The other big parts of our expenditures include utilities, that we actually saw an increase in that this year, or are planning for an increase because we saw increases in this past year. Again, that janitorial contract is zero because we're not contracting that anymore. We've moved that mostly into salaries and benefits. We've had a little bit of an increase for transportation. We do contract our bus services out to Holston Bus Company. We have a little bit for math textbook adoption, which is this year, but we're the benefit of ESSER dollars to pay for a big bulk of that, so we are able to utilize those funds for something we would normally be doing out of our general purpose budget. Annually, we give school allocations according to the number of students they have enrolled, so that's that 434,000 you see there. You see a little bit for internet and other equipment. We've had to purchase new buses. Networking, those sorts of things, the payback to you all for the two projects, also for the bond payments. These are our capital projects that we have planned for next year. Finishing the Tennessee Middle School campus is a priority. So what's left at that is to finish the track, which is that $100,000. We hope that we'll have that done in June, but some of that might roll over to July. The field house is scheduled to happen in the fall. Completion of the Viking Academy at the Friendship Career Center. We have a roof replacement at the administration building planned. We're still working on an OCR complaint, Office of Civil Rights complaint for the Stone Castle, and so we have some work to do where that's concerned. And then the $50,000 is just those things that happen to pop up as the school year goes on. This is just to summarize the Tennessee Middle School complex. The bond from Sullivan County was about $27 million. Out of that, we were able to earn close to $1.5 million in investment as that money was sitting there as we were rolling through the project. Bristol, Tennessee, $2.5 million. We also, again, reaped the benefits of E-rate and ESSER. We were able to purchase some furniture and those sorts of things, so we had some of that. And then the general purpose school fund, those are things that was the school district's contribution, but also able to, as I think I've said before, we were under budget a little bit, so we were able to expand the scope of that work and include a track in the field house that were not originally planned. And again, this is a visual representation of our expenditures. You can see that over 75% of our budget is salary and benefits, and so it makes it really difficult to do anything else other than support our people. We have a little bit for operating and capital, and then our transfers back to you all for the bonds. And just to summarize, we are looking ahead. We have obviously the same challenges that I'm sure the city faces. Supporting the academic and mental health needs of our students, that's been a top priority, particularly as we're working through the ramifications of COVID and what that did to our students and our staff. So we've been able to utilize a lot of our ESSER dollars to support that. We've added mental health supports and counselors. We've really reduced class sizes as best we could with ESSER dollars so that we could provide smaller class sizes to really drill down, particularly at the lower grades where they need extra reading support. We've offered high dosage tutoring, which means we get in small groups of no more than 3 students per adult and really focus intently on reading and math skills to try to recover from that learning loss. We have the same staff shortages that you hear nationwide with teachers, particularly support staff. Our part-time support staff, we're competing with everyone around us, as you all are, so we're struggling through that, and had some substitute teachers and educational assistant shortages this past year that really hindered some things that we wanted to be able to accomplish. Of course, everything costs more, whatever it is, so we're working through those issues, trying to prioritize with the available revenues that we have in our surplus, what capital projects are necessary and important and how to plan those accordingly. We consider it a blessing that we were a step ahead, I think, in being a one-to-one district, and so when we had to go remote, we were able to shift to remote for all students pretty quickly, so we think that's a priority to sustain that. And then, of course, we have a lot of ESSER dollars that are funding a lot of people at the moment, and we won't be able to sustain all of that, and so over the next 2 years, we'll have to prioritize what we value the most, and what we're seeing over the next 2 years is giving us the greatest student gains and the best impact for our students, and we'll sustain those, and we'll let go of other things that are not. So those are the hard decisions we have to make in the coming years. So that's all I have for you all with the budget. Do you have any questions?
I would just say we appreciate, and the community appreciates, your sharing all of this information. I think a lot of times people just assume that things just roll along and don't understand the multiple revenue streams that it takes to fund a school system, fund a city, and to your point, there are hard decisions. We have programs in place, and we're constantly having to assess where we are and reprioritize what it is that we can and can't do. And so, thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you all.
Okay, we have 6 public hearings on tonight's agenda. The public hearing is hereby open for Resolution 22-40, annexation certain territory adjacent to Fox Meadows subdivision into the corporate city limits of Bristol. Mr. Sawyer, would you please summarize this matter for the public?
Yes, Mayor, be glad to. Earlier this year, staff received a request for annexation from Mr. Jerome Maladay, president of Ardent Development Group, and owner of 22.242 acres located within the city's urban growth boundary, but in the unincorporated area of Sullivan County. As most of you know, Mr. Maladay is a residential builder and developer and desires to expand the existing residential subdivision of Fox Meadows, which is located within the city limits. The purpose of Mr. Malinay's request was to obtain city services for the new development, including sanitary sewer service. The new development will allow for the construction of a proposed 176 single-family homes and has an anticipated capital investment of $60 million. The annexation request was preconditioned upon the successful amendment of the planned residential district as it relates to ease of development within the confines of the project. The Bristol Regional Planning Commission considered this request during their April 18th meeting and unanimously forwarded a favorable recommendation. According to statute, all annexations now must be an owner-initiated annexation, as this is. Last month, you may recall, the City Council approved a resolution establishing this public hearing, and then you'll take official action on it later in tonight's agenda. Ms. Young, do you have anything to add to the annexation request? Okay, thank you.
Okay, would anyone in the audience like to address council on this matter? If so, please come up to the podium and state your name and address before making your comments. And I'm sorry, I meant to turn my mic back on, but it's on now. Go ahead, I'm sorry.
My name is Ann Kerner, and my address is 230 Skyline Drive, Bristol, Tennessee. And I'm here as a interested citizen. The only thing I know about the project is what I've read in the paper. I don't know anybody in Fox Meadows. I know where it is because I'm a realtor, retired realtor for 35 years. And but I do know Jerome. I knew Jerome when he was with Charter Federal, which is now Regions Bank, so you know how far back that goes. And I'm only speaking because I know the quality of work that Jerome does. He doesn't, I don't even know if he's here. I haven't seen him in probably 15 or 20 years. There he is. But anyway, I think growth for the city is good, and I have heard over the years that anything that Jerome does is kind of a first-class operation. He does good work. So I think that the people that live in Fox Meadows would probably be proud of whatever he does. And it's basically, I think orderly growth is good in the city. We need some more housing. We recently sold a duplex that we've owned for 35 years in the Redstone area. And the rent that we had been charging a man that lived there and was receiving aid from HUD was $575. And we heard after we sold it that the new owners had jacked up the rent to $1,675. So it's crazy what's going on, and I think we need some more housing to offset some of this crazy stuff that's going on with rents and housing prices and so forth. So, thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Coleman. Anyone else?
Thanks for your time. Ben Franklin tells a story that
Please
when he...
state your name.
Oh, I'm sorry. My name is Scott Ball. I live at 2401 Fox Meadows Circle. Ben Franklin tells a story that when he was a kid, he was given a pocket full of money, and he was so excited he ran to a toy store. And he saw another kid in the toy store with a whistle, and he thought that was the coolest thing he'd ever seen in his life. So he went and grabbed a whistle, took all the money he had in his pocket, threw it down on the counter, and ran home. He's blowing the whistle all the way home. When he gets home, he annoys his family to no end with this whistle, and they finally ask him, Ben, how much did you pay for that whistle? He says, I put everything that was in my pocket. I threw it down. They let him know, wow, you paid 4 times the value of that whistle. When he thought about it, he thought, oh, man. He thought about all the other things he could have got with that same amount of money. And in the end, he got more grief from that whistle than he got joy from it. But he said it was a good life lesson. And anytime he looked around and saw people, when people take the path of least resistance, when he saw people take shortcuts for things that seemed good in the moment, but they hadn't thought through the real consequences of things, he said they paid too much for the whistle. My belief is that the city council is paying too much for the whistle. You're seeing 176 new units, but you're not thinking about the potential consequences of your decision. Here's what I know. I know that the economy is not what it was 6 months ago. I know that the housing market isn't what it was 6 months ago. And if you think that those external pressures don't impact Mr. Malinay or D.R. Horton, I got a bridge to sell you in Brooklyn. I have a feeling I might be able to sell it to you too. Here's the thing. Once you make this decision to pass this zoning request, there is nothing that can change the reality that multifamily homes could come to Fox Meadows. And I don't appreciate, especially in the paper, what we've been hearing, the patronizing tone, especially from Mrs. Firerobin, that we just don't like change, or that you simply trust that this project is just going to go through the way that it's said. That's not good enough. We want the protection of R2. We don't want promises. We don't want wishes. And at the end of the day, if multifamily homes come to Fox Meadows, which they absolutely could, it is possible. It will not be you. It will be the residents of Fox Meadows who, unwittingly and against our will have paid too much for the whistle. Thanks.
I'm Josh Dolinger. I'm at 105 Yellow Sorrel Drive. And thanks for the opportunity to speak tonight. Before getting into the meat of what I'd like to talk about, I would just like to quickly bring your attention to a few things. So I'm a civil engineer with experience in transportation, potable drinking water systems, sanitary sewer systems, and drainage and hydraulics. I can say with near certainty that the existing infrastructure for sanitary sewer systems, storm sewer systems, and potable drinking water systems are at capacity with the current development. It's imperative that any plan moving forward for the future development of this subdivision shall include upgrades to any of these existing systems downstream, which is where I and everyone else here at this meeting live, if any of those connections are made to those systems. And now I'll get into the bulk of what I really wanted to say. So I feel that I speak for the majority of the existing Fox Meadows homeowners when I say that we are not opposed to an expansion of our subdivision. We are only opposed to a rezoning which allows for the construction of multifamily dwellings and even some business types. And two, that rezoning takes away the majority of the input and the control that we have when we bought into this subdivision for any future development. I want to pose a couple questions to you before you vote tonight. The first of which, why would you consider approving a zoning request against the recommendation of the Planning Commission? And I'll note that the Planning Commission was appointed by you, the mayor, and city council based on their guidance and input and their experience and expertise. Secondly, why rezone and allow the developer the flexibility to change his plan after this meeting when the existing zoning allows for single-family homes and essentially everything that his current plan includes, minus a slight increase in density, which I'll just add as a side note, the added lot size and corresponding property values for a slightly lesser dense community would make up for any potential revenue lost in a slightly more dense environment. A member of the Planning Commission at the meeting last month said it best. When reviewing a rezoning request like this, we must take into account the worst case scenario, and by we, I mean you all. Who's to say that the Planning Commission, City Council, will be the same or even remember the concern of us, the citizens, when you vote to approve a plan? And that's why I say that by approving this rezoning request, you take away the community that we bought into and the control that we as citizens have over the future of our development. So with that, I strongly oppose this rezoning request and ask that you vote no and do not approve this rezoning request tonight. Thanks.
Mayor, could I remind you that this public hearing is about the annexation request? The rezoning, request for rezoning will be considered later in our agenda this evening. There'll be ample opportunity to speak to that issue at that time.
Anyone else on the reannexation? Seeing none, this public hearing is hereby closed. The public hearing is open for Resolution 22-41, approving the plan of services for the owner-initiated annexation of territory adjacent to the Fox Meadows subdivision. Mr. Sawyer, would you please summarize this matter?
Yes, Mayor. The plan of services was also reviewed by our Planning Commission at their April 18th meeting and received unanimous approval. But it does include that all police, fire services will be offered at the time of the annexation. Now, as the development proceeds, water service is provided by the Bristol Bluff City Utility District. Sanitary sewer service will be provided once the developer installs that infrastructure, as well as the maintenance of streets, the electric system, refuse collection once residential development occurs. Schools, the elementary schools served in this area will be the Avoca School District. This will also be represented by the South Council District. Recreation will be available upon annexation, as well as community development and planning. The plan of services does recommend a zoning of planned residential district. Sheriff, do you have anything to add to the plan of services conversation?
Okay, would anyone in the audience like to address council on this matter? If so, please come up to the podium and state your name, address before making your comments. Okay, seeing none, this public hearing is hereby closed. The public hearing is hereby open for ordinance 22-4, amending the city's map by designating property along 2216 Volunteer Parkway as B3 General Business. Mr. Sore, would you please summarize this matter for the public?
Yes, Mayor. City Council's familiar with this, with Ordinance 22-4 as it came before you in first reading last month. This is an owner-requested rezoning of Jeffrey Boer, owner of 2216 Volunteer Parkway, owns the property that currently has a split zoning of R1A and B3. The owner has requested that the new zoning designation be B3 for the entire tract of property. The Planning Commission reviewed this matter during their March 21st meeting and forwarded a favorable recommendation. Again, Council approved this on first reading last month. Sheriff, do you have anything to add regarding the zoning uses appropriate to the B3?
Sure. I'll just share a few slides here. We looked at the photos and the map of the property during the first reading of this ordinance, and I'll just show the summary of the permitted uses between the R1A and B3 zones. So the R1A zone does allow single-family and duplex uses, and any uses that are permitted in the RM zone, which includes cemeteries, general farming and gardening, public parks, utilities, and public libraries. The B3 zone is our general commercial zone, so that does run up and down Volunteer Parkway, encompasses a good chunk of the Volunteer Parkway, and that does allow the business uses in the city. So that is the summary of the permitted uses. The future land use plan and policies that are included within the future land use plan do support this rezoning request, so a change to a B3 zone. And again, if you'll remember, there is a portion of this property that is right here that is the split zone. So Mr. Boer's request is to rezone the entirety of this parcel to B3. We did post a sign on the property, notified adjacent property owners of the request, and then the Planning Commission did review this during their meeting on March 21st and voted to send a favorable recommendation to City Council to rezone the R1A portion of Mr. Boer's property at 2216 Volunteer Parkway to B3.
Would anyone in the audience like to address the council on this matter? If so, please come to the podium and state your name, address before making your comments. Okay, this public hearing is hereby closed. The public hearing is hereby open for Ordinance 22-5, amending Chapter 2 of the city's zoning ordinance as it relates to special adaptive reuse permits. Mr. Sore, would you please summarize this for the public?
Yes, Mayor. As City Council is aware, over the past several months, the Planning Commission has explored different avenues, different means to increase the utilization of non-commercial structures, such as the old Rosemont Elementary School. Often these structures are located within residential districts, and the restrictions within those districts limit their ability to be repurposed. This year-long effort by the Planning Commission was led to develop regulations that would encourage the productive repurposing of these structures. City Council reviewed this matter on first reading last month. The Planning Commission has forwarded a favorable recommendation on the text amendment to Chapter 2 of the zoning ordinance, and Ms. Young will further detail the issue.
Thank you, Mr. Soares. So as Mr. Soares stated, this ordinance is tailored to help revitalize and rehabilitate some of the older commercial structures that we do have in some of the older areas of town. So these are two photos of examples on Broad Street and on East Cedar Street. You do have the text of the ordinance included in your package, and we've gone through this in work session and at the first reading, so I won't go into too much detail, but just point out that this does change Chapter 2, or there are some revisions in Chapter 2 and Chapter 3 of the zoning ordinance with this amendment. So we do add a special use permit, special adaptive reuse permit definition in our definition section, and then we add the section here in yellow on the this side of the screen to our special use permit section of the ordinance. And so what this does is very much replicates the special use process in terms of application requirements and public hearing requirements. It does allow for some extra consideration by the Planning Commission, which are the items down here. And some of those include some additional screening and buffering, some additional analysis on business hours, noise, things like that, that a more commercial use might introduce into the neighborhood. In the last pages of your packet, you'll see the actual uses that will be added to the residential section that will be applicable for this special adaptive reuse permit application. So those are included, and those will be the changes that we would make in Chapter 3 of the zoning ordinance. As Mr. Soros stated, the Planning Commission did review this in March, and they did vote to forward a favorable recommendation to City Council for the adoption of this ordinance. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Okay, would anyone in the audience like to address the council on this matter? If so, please come to the podium and state your name and address before making your comments. Seeing none, this public hearing is hereby closed. The public hearing is hereby open for ordinance 22-6, amending Chapter 3 of the city's zoning ordinance as they relate to the planned residential district. Mr. Soar, would you please summarize this matter for the public?
Yes, Mayor. As council's aware, in 2012, the council seated at that time approved the planned residential district zone to replace regulations which guided development in the planning vernacular would have been cluster developments or zero lot line developments. Purpose of the new PRD regulations at that time was to provide a residential district that would allow a variety of housing types in an environmentally sensitive manner. There have been very few developments since that 2012 timeframe. In fact, only 2 developments within the city have taken advantage of the PRD regulations as they're currently stated. Both staff and developers found the language difficult to interpret and difficult to communicate. So as a result, the Planning Commission has spent the last several months reviewing the PRD regulations, and they bring forth a list of text amendments that will provide better clarity to the PRD district. Ms. Young?
Thank you. And so once again, I know we've gone through this in work session and at first reading, so I'll be brief in my summary of the changes that are proposed in this PRD amendment. But the changes or the new requirements of the PRD is the new PRD ordinance requires 10 acres to request a rezoning to PRD. The existing regulations only require 2. The new revised PRD ordinance eliminates the commercial component that we have currently included in our zoning ordinance. So there is no commercial component in the PRD that you would potentially be approving tonight. The Planning Commission has discussed this, and they did request us to look at this a little further, just to potentially come up with a next level PRD. So we'd have maybe a PRD and a PRD 1, something like that, that could potentially add back in a commercial component. But at this point in time, the revised PRD ordinance before you this evening does not include a commercial component. Residential types, residential uses can include single-family, two-family, and multifamily, detached, semi-detached, and attached. The PRD regulations now or proposed require a driveway with access from a road or accessway has to extend 20 feet past the back of curb or back of sidewalk if present. And then it requires an open space requirement of 20% if there is a multifamily component included within the PRD. The PRD does allow for flexible setback requirements, so it requires a perimeter buffer around the project of 25 feet if the use is single family, 35 feet if multifamily. It allows Planning Commission to look at lots of transitions, so areas where an existing neighborhood might transition into a new PRD neighborhood, and allows them to set the specific setbacks at the front and side yards for those development or for those areas. In terms of multifamily requirements, the PRD does allow multifamily. It caps the multifamily buildings that might be on the perimeter of the project at 4 units in one building and a width of 80 feet. So you wouldn't have anything wider than 80 feet or 4 units at the perimeter. It does allow multifamily buildings within the development itself, so internal to the development, to go up to 6 units per building, and that's only within the project itself. What you have included and on the screen here are just the text, the language that's proposed to replace the existing PRD, and this is just the formal language of kind of what I just went through. This shows, we've looked at a couple times, the transition lots in the Fox Meadows development. So it transitions from the existing homes here into the new section here. The PRD allows the Planning Commission to look carefully at these areas and set those setbacks against those lots here, and it allows them to look at the orientation of those homes. The Planning Commission did review the concept plan, and actually this scenario here during their last meeting. It was not an issue of approval. There was no approval. It was just a concept plan. So the Planning Commission did review that with no real negative comment during their last meeting. So this, I just have a few slides here, and I'll just show you. The driveway requirement was to keep trucks or cars out and from sticking out into the street if the buildings were brought closer to the street with setbacks. These are the pre-application conference section. This is the items that are required for approval, required to be submitted. And then this is a summary table of the residential zoning districts, and I can slow down or go back to this at any point in time, but we did look at this at first reading. It just shows the comparison of setbacks, lot space, building area, height requirements between the R1A, R2, R3, B3, and PRD zones. And this sets forth all those requirements that I just kind of summarized quickly into this table against some of the other uses. One point on the PRD or subdivision development in general, subdivisions are regulated by our subdivision regulations. The PRD does not eliminate, it doesn't accept any requirements related to sidewalks or setbacks. So those requirements will be in effect with new PRD developments, certainly with the Fox Meadows development under consideration now. The new streets will have sidewalks and the development will have streetlights. So the Planning Commission reviewed this on April 18th, and the recommendation to City Council was favorable for the adoption of the PRD ordinance as I've presented it this evening.
Would anyone in the audience like to address council on this matter? If so, please come to the podium and state your name and address before making your comments. Seeing none, this public hearing is hereby closed. The public hearing is hereby open for ordinance 22-7, adopting a budget and appropriating funds for the fiscal year July 1, 2022 through June 30, 2023. Mr. Shore, would you please summarize this matter for the public?
Yes, Mayor. Ordinance 22-7 is considered on second reading this evening for formal adoption of the fiscal 2023 budget and appropriations ordinance for the fiscal year beginning July 1st, 2022. The fiscal 2023 budget totals $137,033,523, reflects an increase of $3,696,937. The municipal government portion of that budget stands at $80,955,071. The proposed budget does focus on the key themes that Council has established of economic development, education, infrastructure, and public safety. The budget continues to maintain all programs and services as in the past while making strategic capital investments in the city's future and the needs of the community. Major projects include the continued reconstruction of East Cedar Street, construction of a new fire station serving East Bristol, construction of sidewalks along Bluff City Highway from Edgemont Avenue to Lavender Lane, improvements to the biosolids handling process at the Bristol Regional Wastewater Treatment Plant, a public-private partnership to develop public pickleball courts, trail improvements at Steel Creek Park, a new farmers market facility, water system improvements in the Exit 74 area of Interstate 81, and resurfacing approximately 14 lane miles of roadway. The plan of work includes key economic development partnerships. This includes a continued partnership in the marketing efforts for Aerospace Park, the grading of a new 20-acre industrial site at Partnership Park 2, the partnership development of the new 35-acre rail serve site at Partnership Park 2. And the fiscal 2023 budget also includes a 5% across-the-board increase to all city employees. In addition, the employee compensation scale has been adjusted to reflect labor market conditions in our region. The school system portion of the budget totals $56,078,458. It does reflect a decrease of $6.9 million, a little over $6.9 million. The decrease is primarily attributed to a reduction in the school capital facilities fund with the conclusion of the construction at Tennessee Middle School, as well as reflecting the diminishment of the ESSER funding that was reflected in the fiscal 2022 budget.
Okay, thank you. Would anyone in the audience like to address council on this matter? If so, please come to the podium and state your name and address before making your comment. Seeing none, this public hearing is hereby closed. This brings us to the appearance of citizens section of our agenda. This section provides an opportunity for the public to address City Council on any matter that is not on the printed agenda for formal consideration. Comments are limited to matters of city business only. A response will not likely be made at this time, since in most cases neither the council nor the city manager will be prepared to effectively respond to the concern. The city manager will look into this matter and report back to city council, or as appropriate, have staff meet with you in an effort to satisfy your concern. Comments are limited to 3 minutes per individual and are not transferable to other individuals. Groups are encouraged to select a spokesperson to represent them. I've been provided a list of individuals desiring to address council this evening. And first on that list is, I believe it's Miss Abigail Hampton. Miss Hampton?
My name is Abigail Hampton. Address is 795 Old Jonesboro Road, Bristol, Tennessee. My name is Abigail Hampton, like I said, and my purpose for tonight is to get a better understanding of the budget and finances that will help fund student resource officers, SROs, in the Bristol City School System. In the wake of what just recently happened in Texas, I checked in on some numbers and different agendas for the upcoming school year, and I was surprised with what I found. I have 3 daughters, 1 at Tennessee Middle School and 2 at Haynesville Elementary. As the city knows, you all, there are 7 schools in this system, and 2 of the schools, Tennessee Middle and Tennessee High School, are fully funded with SROs in the city. The city, you all provide equipment, training, salary, and benefits for those 2 schools and have SROs. The other 5 schools are elementary schools, and as of right now, in the upcoming year for the budget, there are only 3 SRO officers in the budget planned, and so they are going to have to share officers. Based on a response from Dr. Annette Tudor about SROs, she emailed and said, quote, for 2022 and 23 school year, we have 3 SOR budgeted in our general purpose budget because the SRO grant is no longer available from the state. Because we are funding them in our general purpose budget, we are not restricted as how we are to assign and be scheduled. Therefore, we would go back to sharing SROs for Anderson and Avoca and Haynesville and Holston View, end quote. So some of you all may have students that are at Avoca, and you're going to have kids that are having to be split with the SRO officer. So sharing to me is not going to work. There's no way you can share an officer and put kids' safety at part-time. That is like having 3 principals for 5 schools. It's never going to work. After contacting SRO needs with Annette Tudor, Bill Mr. Sora, a school board member and a city council member, I do feel that all parties are very interested and passionate about having an SRO. As a parent, I don't think that we can have, this shouldn't even be up for discussion. My question is who is responsible for the money and where it's going to come from? Police officers are hired through the city, so does the funding come from the city or does it come from the school system? Dr. Tudor just said in that budget that you all approved that there was, I did see $99,000 set aside for safe schools. Does it come from there? I reached out to Sullivan County, and there are 15 SRO officers in that county, full-time in every school. Westridge has 3 SROs, and the other schools each have 1 full-time all the time. What they did is Sullivan County and the Board of Education of Sullivan County, they split the benefits, salaries, all that. So my question is, could the city and Bristol, Tennessee City Schools come together in partnership for your community to protect these kids all the time? Every school needs an SRO officer. This should not even be a question. In closing, you're probably going to wonder where I'm going with this, but hear me out. Back in 2009, there was a senator in Virginia, Senator Deeds, and his son was mentally ill. So his son stabbed him in his chest and his head multiple times, and then he committed suicide. So you're wondering, what does this have to do with school shootings? At the time, there was allowed for 6 hours to hold a patient, which Senator Deeds' son was not given a room. After that, he was released. Senator Deeds changed. He made change, 6 hours to 12 hours, in order for somebody to have a hospital bed. What happened is he had change. It took the right thing to happen to the wrong person. The wrong person to happen to let's start over. The wrong thing had to happen to the right person for change to be made. We should not put our kids at risk for change to be made. We need to be proactive on this, not reactive. August 1st, I think every parent would love to have an SRO in every school. We should not be part-time and split. Thank you for your time.
Next, we have Mr. Barry Hopper.
Barry Hopper in Forest Hills. I'm a recipient of the wonderful odors coming from the landfill. When I returned from my vacation, which I enjoyed the beach immensely, fresh air, sunshine, and I get the paper. This is the Saturday's May the 28th paper. I was incensed that Bristol, Tennessee would even consider accepting a bribe from Bristol, Virginia. As it states in this settlement, and I have to appreciate the fact that our worthy councilman and our worthy mayor didn't respond to this, which I think is a positive sign. Thank you. But I just want to point out, if you folks happen to remember what it said, basically point 1, number A, that Bristol, Virginia will comply with the CAA and RCRA as soon as practical. Delaying tactic. Other statements regarding commercial waste being placed in the landfill. That does not exclude other waste, I would assume, because in order to contour this travesty, they're going to have to add more waste to it. So don't be fooled by this settlement. And I want you all to consider that many of us are being affected by this. Another thing that it says that Bristol, Tennessee will actively seek funding for this project. It also goes on to say that if, in fact, that Bristol, Tennessee doesn't agree to this, the way I read this, is that within 120 days of Bristol, Tennessee agreeing to the terms of this proposed settlement, then action will be taken by Bristol, Virginia, if that's the way I'm reading it. I may be wrong. So if Bristol, Tennessee doesn't accept this $250,000 bribe, then Bristol, Virginia is still going to be just basically sitting on it. And apparently this thing has been going on, as you well know, for the last at least 2 years. Therefore, they've had adequate time, and apparently the only action that they're expecting to take is determined by inaction. So my feeling is that Bristol, Tennessee should not capitulate and accepting this 250,000 carrot on a stick, because if we eat the carrot, we're going to be beaten by the stick. So, please, council members, neighbors and friends, please don't buy into this. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hopper.
I have a letter that Mayor Luttrell has asked me to read this evening. Esteemed council members, greetings and peace. I apologize that I cannot be there in person to share these words of support and encouragement. Forgive me and know that prayers are being said for you from as far away as Texas. It is now a little more than a year since many of us became extremely alarmed about the state of the Bristol, Virginia landfill. Since then, many words have been said, meetings held, op-eds written, and speeches given. In that time, a critique has emerged recently directed at you, the council. The critique is that the complaint you have filed in federal court is both a waste of taxpayer funds and doesn't help the city of Bristol, Virginia deal constructively with the landfill issue, but instead drains much-needed resources. I am writing to encourage you because this critique is immaterial to the main issue at hand, and frankly, in this writer's view, misses the point. The issue has always been accountability. Who will hold the city of Bristol, Virginia and its leadership accountable when its actions or lack thereof harm its own citizens, not to mention the citizens of Bristol, Tennessee? In light of the recent report issued by the expert panel convened by VADEQ, it is clear that the problem is technically challenging and systemic in nature. It will take careful attention to detail, urgency, political resolve, financial support, and, to be honest, a little luck. I prefer God's sovereign care to put things aright. Perhaps you know who has written this. In the end, and as I think you have realized, it will take our legal system to enforce those standards of accountability. And this is as it should be. We are a nation of laws, and our entire society is predicated upon the idea that when neighbor has grievance against neighbor or municipality against another, we resolve those issues. This isn't the vice of litigiousness. It is the twin virtues of temperance and justice. Justice demands we restrain wrongdoers, and temperance demands we avoid further harm through indifference or retribution. As a taxpayer in Bristol, Tennessee, I do not think you are wasting my tax dollars. In fact, I thank you for using those tax dollars to ensure that I can breathe safely in my own home. As the pastor of First Presbyterian, I thank you for taking up this cause, ensuring we can gather in our sanctuary without the stench of garbage overwhelming our senses. I also thank you on behalf of a community of neighbors who have suffered too long under the shadow of the beast. Thank you for your service, and thank you for your time. In Christ, Reverend Samuel Weddington, Senior Pastor, First Presbyterian Church, Bristol.
Do we have anyone else in attendance this evening who would like to address council? Okay. Next, we'll consider an appointment to fill a position on the Community Development Advisory Committee. The term of office will be for a period of 3 years ending April 30, 2025. The candidate is Ms. Ella Kane. Would anyone like to speak on behalf of the candidate? Please mark your ballots and pass them to the city manager.
I can speak in favor of Ella Kane. She has served on the Housing Authority and on community development, and brings a lot of knowledge and experience, and also experience with citizens in our community as well, to bring that to the table. Thank you.
Okay. Anyone else? Okay.
Hutton votes for Ella Kane. Luttrell votes for Ella Kane. Powers votes for Ella Kane. And Fire-Robin votes for Ella Kane.
We have 4 resolutions on tonight's agenda. First, we have Resolution 22-40, approving an owner-initiated annexation of the Ardent Development Group property located adjacent to the Fox Meadows subdivision in the corporate limits of the city of Bristol. Staff summarized this matter during the public hearing earlier this evening. Does any member of council have questions for the staff? Is there a motion to take action on this item?
Move to approve.
Second. Second.
Would any member of council like to discuss Resolution 22-40?
I'll just say that the recognition tonight of one of our members of our fire department is an example of why developments are interested in being part of our city, that we do have services that we're really proud of, and that makes it attractive for new development.
Anyone else? The public had an opportunity to comment on this issue during the public hearing, so I believe we are ready for a vote. Mary Lee, would you please call the roll?
Powers,
Yes.
Littrell,
Yes.
Firewalden,
Yes.
Yes.
Next, we have Resolution 22-41, approving the annexation plan of services for the Ardent Development Group property. Staff summarized this matter during the public hearing earlier this evening. Does any member of council have questions for the staff?
I do have a question. The comment was made in regard to the sewer and potable water. Ms. Young, could you address that in regard to this development?
So the water service for this development will be provided by Bristol Bluff City Utility District. The extension of the public sanitary sewer service will be the responsibility of the developer with the development of the community. But as I understand, and there's certainly people in the room that could probably speak in more detail about this, the capacity would be there for the sewer system.
So we are assured that there is capacity for the sewer system and the potable water.
Yes, I mean, we will deep dive into the weeds of the all the requirements with the plat as we take these next steps forward. But yes, I think that I don't think there's any issue there with the sewer capacity.
The only issue possibly would be through a sewage lift station, and that would become a responsibility of the developer. We would use our material services agreement certainly to assist in the financial aspect of that, but the dive is, as Ms. Young indicated, the dive is not that deep yet.
And the plan of services does state that it's the developer responsibility for those items.
And Mr. Malinay, you're comfortable with that?
So, Sheriff, Ms. Young, can you just elaborate just a tiny bit so people understand what the process is for when there's a development of any kind? What is involved with site plan review and who does that and how those things are determined? Just a little bit to help us to all understand that process.
Sure. So the process in Mr. Malinay's example is, of course, annexation is required for the portion of his project that's not within the city limits, so that he's able to receive the city services outlined on the screen, such as police, refuse collection, so on and so forth. The extension of the sanitary sewer service will be required so he can develop the lots as he has proposed. What he has proposed as far as kind of a preliminary concept plan, a concept plan that was reviewed by the Planning Commission. If he receives the approval of the annexation and the rezoning request, the next step in his process will be the preparation of the preliminary plat of the subdivision. And that, at that point in time, he's certainly done his due diligence in terms of looking at the project, but we'll definitely get into the weeds and approval process, making sure that the subdivision development meets all city standards, requirements, regulations, and he will be working with staff all through that process to make sure that when the plat goes to the Planning Commission for approval, that all the I's are dotted and T's are crossed in terms of meeting city requirements.
And just something that I was just thinking too. So if we were not to annex and if it were to develop, they would still use the same utility water district, right? And they would develop under Sullivan County.
Sure.
guidelines.
Yes, they would use the same water service would be available, but our sewer service would not extend to them if they were not within the city boundary.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
And any sewer service would be septic systems. at
That is correct.
If it were county, right?
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. Anything else? Okay. Is there a motion to take action on this item?
Motion to approve Resolution 2241, the plan of services for the annexation of certain territory.
Second.
Would any member of council like to discuss Resolution 22-41? I believe we're ready to vote. Mary Lee, would you please call the roll?
Yes.
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 Next, we have a Resolution 22-42, appointing a municipal judge to serve a 4-year term commencing July 1, 2022, and ending June 2026. I think I said that. Mr. Sorrell, would you please summarize this matter for the public?
Yes, Mayor, I'd be glad to. As council's aware, the term of our current municipal judge, A.D. Jones, expires June 30th of this year. Judge Jones has served with distinction in this capacity since his appointment to his initial 4-year term in 2014. The municipal judge provides, as you're aware, presides over municipal court and cases related to traffic citation and municipal code violations. It is as is customary, our Department of Human Resources solicited resumes for the position. Judge Jones was the lone candidate, so to speak, for the position, and Resolution 2242 provides with that appointment. It is, as I indicated earlier, it's a 4-year term that will commence July 1, 2022, and end June 30th, 2026. Judge Jones is with us this evening if you have any questions of the judge.
Don't have any questions, but just one comment. I'd just like to comment on what a great job Judge Jones does for the city, and I'm glad to, hopefully for that to continue.
I would agree. Thank you for your service.
Would any member of council like to discuss Resolution 2242? Hearing none, I believe we're ready to vote. Mary Lee, would you please call the roll?
Do we have a motion?
I'll move to approve
So sorry.
the 2242 resolution appointing a municipal judge, and that judge being A.D. Jones.
And I'll second.
Got way ahead of myself, sorry.
It's easy
Now I
to
believe
do.
we're ready to vote.
Yes.
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 Next, we have Resolution 22-43, expressing the city's support for the Nature Center at Steel Creek Park. Mr. Sorrell, would you please summarize this matter for the public?
Yes, Mayor, I'm going to ask Parks and Recreation Director Terry Napier to approach the podium. And as he's making his way there, I want to commend Terry, as well as his staff at the Nature Center, as well as the Friends of Steel Creek Park, for this initiative to affiliate with the American Alliance of Museums. This is the first step of a journey to affiliate with the Smithsonian Institute as an affiliate program. So he needs some help from us in terms of support resolutions. So Terry, it's yours.
Thank you, Mr. Storer. So we've come a long way from the little nature hut that was built back in the 60s over by Shelter B, and you're certainly all aware of the improvements and expansions of the Nature Center in the last few years. Those wouldn't have happened without the support of council, and most importantly, nothing would have happened without our Friends group. And Sonny Shermer's here tonight representing our Friends group, who have done just a phenomenal job. If you haven't been in the Nature Center and see the money that they've raised, the exhibits that they've built, and I understand that we were down to 2 final exhibits. We now have the funds for one of those, so we're one exhibit away from completing all of our permanent exhibits, and then we'll get into some rotating exhibits. But as part of this process, we really want to raise the bar in what we do and the professionalism. Not that we don't have an exceptional staff that does an outstanding job, but we started looking at how we do things, how we take care of our specimens, how we take care of things down the road, because we have some really neat stuff at our nature center. So the process of running that, it's a museum. So we started looking at how do we improve ourselves, and so what we found was the best way to do that was through accreditation through the Museum Association. And so we are in the, I guess, self-assessment process of that right now, where we're looking at everything we do, our policies, our day-to-day activities, how we take care of our stuff, how we take care of our stuff in the future. And we got to kind of a point where what they're going to need is really, because we're owned by the city, the Nature Center is a function of the city, we need just to document support from our council. Not that you haven't done it all these years, and we appreciate everything you've done, but as you know, when you get into accreditation, it's all about documenting what you've done. So the resolution before you tonight is just asking you to formally, in resolution, pledge that support of our Nature Center, and to make sure that we're going to, forever take care of those specimens. Our policies ultimately will say if down the road, if council decides not to fund the Nature Center anymore, that we'll have a process for all of our collections, what happens to them. Because again, we have a lot of stuff, a lot of it's been donated, so we'll have a process where that stuff would go to someplace else. And that's what the accreditation is about, is to keep this thing going for generations and generations. So with that, I'll answer any questions.
I would just say we're very fortunate to have the Nature Center. The value of its specimens, its extensive library directly related to this unique ecosystem that's found nowhere else on the planet. It's remarkable what has been done, and it's only a huge thank you to the Friends of Steels Creek and to Fire Robin, who has led the charge for many, many years. And we thank you for your diligence, and to staff, to Jeremy, to everyone. We think y'all have just done a great job. Terry, I know you have been there all the way through, so thank you.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you.
I would ditto all that, and I guess we're asking questions, but we're into discussion. So anyway, and also would note that Sonny Shermer, who's here, that she began her journey as a member of Parks and Rec, and our first visioning we did for the Nature Center, she decided she would retire that position and spend her time starting the Friends Group. And if folks here have not been to Steel Creek Park and gone to the Nature Center, you absolutely have to. It is very classy. It is fantastic, but beyond that, it is the staff that are just passionate, can talk with children, and their love of nature from the staff just is contagious. It spreads easier than COVID. So just really appreciate the staff that we have, and also the vision and the foresight of the people who came before us to preserve the acreage at Steel Creek Park. So I think it's exciting to take this journey, and hopefully we'll keep going and get there before too long.
I hope to be back soon with that accreditation document.
And if anybody wants to contribute a small amount or a large amount to adopt the last exhibit, they're welcome to do that. They can talk to Terry, to Sonny, to somebody in the Friends group.
And I would just add, there's no doubt that we'll receive the accreditation for this, because we know that y'all do such a great job. And then Bristol will be the home of 2 Smithsonian accredited museums, which for a community of our size is simply unheard of. So congratulations.
Thank you.
And if you haven't been down there, I really encourage you to go see it, and especially drop by and see Snappy the turtle. He's my favorite.
Well, pretty soon it's going to be the beehive that people are going to be going to see, too.
We've got an indoor beehive exhibit, but we also just finished the fundraising for our sloth, for our giant sloth, which is extremely exciting. And then the last exhibit is the life of a dead tree, which is, if you have to come and see the Nature Center to understand how that works. So thank you.
Okay. Is there a motion to take action on this item?
I make a motion that we approve this resolution expressing support for the City of Bristol at the Easter Center at Steel Creek Park.
I'll second that. Any other discussion? Mary Lee, I believe we're ready to vote.
Does
Yes.
anybody in the public want to speak to
Oh,
it?
I'm sorry.
Yeah, I assume that's okay to do that for this.
Absolutely can.
So, Sonny, you want to add anything? Good job.
Now we're ready.
Yes.
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 Next on the agenda is the first reading of ordinance 22-8, amending the city's zoning map by rezoning certain property within the Fox Meadows subdivision from R2, single family and duplex residential, to PRD, planned residential district. Mr. Sawyer, would you please summarize ordinance 22-8?
Yes, Mayor, I'd like to point out that ordinance 22-8 and ordinance 22-9 are somewhat companion in that they establish a zoning designation. 22-8 addresses existing property within the corporate limits. 22-9 addresses the newly annexed area. I would also point out that this is the appropriate time for anyone in the audience to speak to this issue once you invite them to the podium, Mayor. But to summarize this topic, this is a request from Ardent Development Group to rezone 23.29 acres of property that's located south of the existing Fox Meadow subdivision. The owner's request to rezone the property from its current designation of R2, which is single family and duplex residential, to PRD, planned residential development. The PRD zoning regulations will provide the developer with greater flexibility in meeting the setback requirements for residential construction. If the rezoning is approved, the developer does propose in the aggregate on both properties to construct 176 single-family homes. The Planning Commission considered this item on May 16th. A motion was made to forward the favorable recommendation to City Council, but the motion did fail to pass with a vote of 4-4. Ms. Young, would you like to detail the proposed uses under the planned residential district?
Yes, sir. Thank you. So I'm going to quickly walk through a map and zoning of the surrounding area on this parcel. As Mr. Sawyer stated, this item and the next item are companions to one another in terms of the PRD rezoning. What we're talking about right now is this piece here that is, as of right now, it is within city limits, so it's not subject to the annexation request. We're talking about this parcel here. This parcel is zoned R2. You can see in the surrounding area, you have the existing Fox Meadows development that is R2. You have north of that R3B, which is a Sullivan County multifamily designation. And then around the property here, you have the Sullivan County A1 zone, which in Sullivan County A1 designates general agricultural and estate residential zone. The annexed areas parcels that you all just discussed are right here. So we are talking about this parcel here in red. I just want to talk just a second about the process to Councilwoman Robbins' last question. This is a puzzle, this project. So there are a couple pieces of this. We've discussed the PRD ordinance for a couple months now. So 6-7, here we are tonight at the public hearing and second reading for the PRD ordinance that can be applied anywhere in the city. The rezoning request tonight for this city portion is tracking here at 6-7. So this is the first reading of this ordinance. The second reading and public hearing would be proposed for the July 12th City Council agenda. The annexation you all have been working on, talking about for some months. Here we are tonight at 6-7 with the public hearing that you all just had on the annexation and on the plan of services. The next item on your agenda is the first reading of the ordinance to designate zoning. which again, the applied zoning, what Mr. Maloney has applied for is the PRD. 712 will be the public hearing and second reading of this ordinance to designate the zoning on the annexed parcels. Outside of this process, you have the subdivision plat. So that is the document that will set the plat, set the development of the subdivision plat, of the subdivision. The Planning Commission did receive a preview and overview of the concept plan for the project on May 16th. But the Planning Commission is the authority to approve the plat once we do have the preliminary plat ready to roll forward for their review. So this is just a summary of the process. I know there's a lot of pieces to this, so I just wanted to start with the process. Just a little bit of history about the Fox Meadows development. It was actually annexed into the city in 1998, and it was annexed as an MH1 zone, which is a mobile home district at the time. It was rezoned in 2003 to the R2 zone that's present there today. The preliminary plat for the Fox Meadows development was actually approved in 2002. It's 222 lots. And there are a couple different phases of the plat and the development that I'll show you here. Phase 1 was developed first, 2004, 61 lots. Phase 2 is developed in 2010 with 54 lots. And Phase 3 in 2017 with 23 lots. So you have the yellow, blue, and red of existing Fox Meadows, what's on the ground today. There is another phase that's part of this preliminary plat for future development that was approved back in 2002 as a preliminary plat. And what this red line here designates is the property line that's been created by Mr. Maloney. So if you look at this parcel here, that will look familiar to what's been hatched in red on the previous location and zoning map. So that's the parcel here that's considered for the rezoning to the rezoning from R2 to PRD. I have a couple drone images of the area to show. This is Beaver Creek up here, running this way. So this is where you come down, the entrance to Fox Meadows, and there's the cul-de-sac at the end. So this is the existing Fox Meadows development here. And then this is the proposed area for rezoning and the proposed or the approved annexation area over here behind this row of existing homes.
Michelle, I have a question, if I can
Yes,
interrupt. So there are how many units here, homes, single-family homes, and then what is the number that you get to that there has to be the second entrance?
So I think there are 136 approved lots. There are 133 homes built today on the ground. And then the subdivision regulation trigger for the second entrance is 150 lots.
Okay,
So
17 away, 17 single-family units away. So where...
Lee, can you do your microphone?
Oh, I'm sorry. So basically 17 units away, 133 to 150, 17 single-family units away. And could you show us where that second entrance would be?
Let's see. It would come out onto Beaver Creek on this side of the project. And I do have, when I show you the concept plan, let me see if another image might, that one's not going to do it. Nope. I'll show you on the concept plan. I'll be sure to point that out. But it essentially runs on this side of the project and connects back out to Beaver Creek up in here. But I'll point that out on the concept plan. I have an image of that in your presentation this evening. So this shows, let me get this point right, okay. So here's the cul-de-sac looking towards Beaver Creek. If I flip to this next slide, this flips around, and just to orient, here's the cul-de-sac. Here's the power line that comes down through this section of the development. And then this just turns around just a little bit more. Here again is the cul-de-sac, the existing Fox Meadows development, and here's that power line. So in this section, this is what we're talking about the rezoning for on this side of the power line. Here again shows the outline of this parcel, and this shows the natural features or constraints of the property. It does have, you can see from the drone footage or drone images, it does have a rolling characteristic to it. There is some flood zone up here, but it does not impact this area, this new section of development for Fox Meadows. Just a quick summary of the permitted uses allowed in these zones. R2 allows single-family and duplex uses. It allows any use permitted in the RM zone, so that's that list that includes general farming, public parks. R2 allows development of single-family and duplex uses at 9 units per acre. If you look down below at the A1 Sullivan County zone, it allows single-family homes, it allows manufactured homes, it allows cultural and recreational services such as libraries, museums, educational facilities. It allows cemeteries, golf courses, and agricultural uses. The PRD, as you all have revised, or will, if you approve the revision, it allows single-family and two-family residential structures. It allows multifamily residential structures, and it caps the overall density at 6 units per acre. This table probably looks familiar to you. I've shown it a couple different times, but this shows the comparison between the R2 and the PRD zones. The R2 does have more traditional setback requirements, lot space requirements. Again, it allows 9 units per acre for development. The PRD allows the more flexible setbacks. It requires that perimeter project setback requirement, and it allows the Planning Commission, again, to set those transition lot setbacks. The PRD, when you subdivide a lot, it's still going to have to be 50 feet. To have 50 feet of road frontage to meet the subdivision requirements. And then there are those stipulations on multifamily development if multifamily development is part of the PRD proposal. Again, the cap on density is 6 units per acre. And just a little bit more on density. What we're talking about when we're talking about density is it's the number of dwelling units allowed per acre of land. And our zoning ordinance defines a dwelling unit as a single unit providing complete independent living facilities for one or more persons, including permanent provisions for living, sleeping, eating, cooking, and sanitation. So this ordinance and the discussion of density, I just wanted to provide those definitions and then go on to show how some of this general math works to get you to number of units. So with the expansion area of Fox Meadows, so the new area of Fox Meadows, you have the 23.290 acres that you're considering with this item for rezoning to PRD. You have the 3 annexation parcels. Cumulatively, they're 22.242 acres, which gives you approximately 45.5 acres of new residential development. So if you multiply that out by the allowances, 45.5 acres is 6 units an acre, which is allowed by the PRD zone, gets you to 273 units. The same acreage at 9 units an acre allowed by the R2 zone gives you 409 units. And I'll say that to say those are the metrics of the zoning ordinance. It does not take into consideration all of the other elements that go into development of property, such as infrastructure requirements, the terrain, what space may be taken up by the road. So these are numbers that we discuss when we're talking about zoning or appropriate land uses, but I do want to couch that with the explanation that it doesn't mean just because you have 45 acres you absolutely would achieve 409 units. But just wanted to give you those points of comparison. So Mr. Maloney has said a couple times, and I just wanted to show this math. The existing Fox Meadows development, it's approximately 40 acres, it's approximately 136 lots. When you do that math, you get 3.4 units per acre. The proposed concept plan for his expansion for the 45.5 acres, 176 lots, granted, the setbacks, the lot sizes, those requirements of the R2 are not there, but it does net out at about 3.9 units per acre. So this comparison has come up a couple of times, at least with the Planning Commission discussion, so I just wanted to provide that background for City Council and the public to have for review. So the staff analysis of the rezoning request, we did note that the subject property is surrounded by residential uses, farmland and vacant land. Adjacent lots to the north are inside the city limits of Bristol and they're zoned R2. Adjacent surrounding properties that are in Sullivan County have the Sullivan County zoning designation of A1. Staff feels that the PRD district is an appropriate zone to complement the existing R2 residential area and the agricultural area surrounding. And just to provide the information, the future development of this project will require Planning Commission approval in terms of the subdivision plat. It must follow all requirements of the zoning ordinance along with all other applicable codes and regulations of the city. This is an excerpt of the future land use map of the area. It does suggest a residential zone classification with a medium designation of approximately 6 units per acre. We also do look at the land use policies that accompany the map and that are included in the future land use plan. Policy number 2 supports this request, which this policy number 2 says that we should provide a housing inventory that's diversified in dwelling unit type, size, and design that supports the local population, attracts new residents, and creates a high-quality residential environment. We did place 2 public notification signs on this property. We did notify adjacent property owners of the request by letter. As of today, we've received 10 telephone calls with questions and concerns about the rezoning and how property might be affected. We did receive 8 comment letters back, 3 in favor of the rezoning request and 5 in opposition. And I will add 1 email in opposition did come in today after I had put this slide together. So that's the summary of the public notification and comments we received. So this shows the concept plan for the expanded area of Fox Meadows. Again, this section would be the city portion now that you're considering for the rezoning request. And this side shows the annexation area that is also requested for PRD designation. That's the next item on your agenda. So this shows the concept development of the 176 new lots. And then this shows what the Planning Commission reviewed as a concept plan, and those are those lots of transition where you have you have the existing homes within the existing section of Fox Meadows, and Mr. Malinay provided some blown up shots of how the proposed new structures will relate, and the Planning Commission was asked to look at compatibility with the existing homes, and did so during that concept review on May 16th. As Mr. Soar stated in his introduction, the Planning Commission did review this request on May 16th. There was a motion that was made to send a favorable recommendation to City Council, but the motion did not pass, and the vote on that was 4-4. I'd be happy to answer any questions or go into any detail about any of the slides.
I want to thank you for the charts that you've done with the difference in the zoning, and also the numbers one that you just did. That was talked about, but seeing it in writing is really helpful to see what's possible with R2 versus PRD with the acreage that's present.
I just have one thing, and it may be appropriate right now or may not be. Mr. Malinay, would you reiterate what your agreement is with your national builder of what you're going to be building there?
Jerome Malinay, Art and Development, Bristol, Tennessee. Basically, I'm going to reiterate, staff's been wonderful to work with. And I think the cat's pretty much out of the bag. It's D.R. Horton that I've got a development agreement with. And they have certain criteria for lots. It could not be met under the R2. Various reasons. The shape of the remaining property, the topography of the remaining property, and worked with staff to come up with the PRD use to make this work. And basically, D.R. Horton will be building their houses. We will be providing the roads and infrastructure. This is something that would start July, August and would be completed over a 3-year period. The homes would be single-family homes. The values would be approximately upper 2s to upper 3s that they'd be selling the houses for. And I think it's an absolute wonderful win-win situation for everybody.
And in no time, anything was discussed about condos, townhouses, apartments. It's all single-family homes.
I'll take the opportunity to make the comment, if I wanted to do duplexes or they wanted to do duplexes, we didn't have to ask for this rezoning. We could have already done that under the R2. As far as the annexation and the county land, I had to look this up because I had no idea what the answer to the question was myself. There's 5 pages of things other than residential I can do on the Sullivan County property. Everything that would be done under the current zoning and or property that would be annexed would be far less desirable than the 176 homes going in.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions, staff? Is there a motion to take action on this item?
Yes.
Well, you will, but it's in order coming on down. But you want to go ahead and let them do it now?
We can go out of order.
Okay, go
It's-
ahead. We'll do it with comments.
No.
We're going to let you have time for comments.
Asking for public comments and try to keep it to about 3 minutes. So it's your turn.
Yeah, the vote would have normally came after all this.
My name's Josh Sadler. I live at 2505 Fox Meadow Circle. And a couple points that I want to bring up. The first one being talking about the rezoning. You know, if he's wanting to build the exact same houses that are already there, why do we have to rezone? Basically, you guys are asking us to trust this gentleman that's local, but also is using a national company to build these. And so we just have to take it upon that you guys and whoever else is involved is going to have our best interests at heart, and it doesn't seem that way to begin with. That's just for starters. A couple of other things is anybody driven on Beaver Creek Road personally up there? It's a pretty small 2-lane road. And with the existing traffic that's already on it, every day it's a hustle and bustle to get out. Not only that, you have Stickley Farms that has a lot of traffic that goes in and out. Not only that, you have a fire department. You know, since we're talking about that is also operating on that road. So trying to turn out off of Beaver Creek on a 394, it's a nightmare. It's an absolute nightmare. And we currently have roughly 135 houses with 1 entrance. We're making it work, but it's a little congestive. And then you're wanting to add 176 more houses and only add 1 more entrance with the still small Beaver Creek Road. So that's one issue. Let's see. My biggest thing is we have to trust you guys and this developer that he's going to do what he says, but he can change and do whatever he wants at any time. So my first thing, and I apologize because I do not know your name and I don't see your plaque, but the young lady on the very end on the left, talking about we need to accept change. We don't have a problem accepting change. We actually embrace it. We just want to leave it under the same zoning so that we know the houses that we bought into that neighborhood are going to be built the same way, not take it off of somebody's hopes and dreams. You know, you hold hope in one hand and, you know, in the other one and see what fills up. I would just like to leave the zoning so that way he has no option but to build what he's supposed to. I don't understand why that's a big issue. And if this was your all's backyard, would you think it's the same way? That's all I ask, is just take into consideration if he's promising us the world that he's going to build what's already there, why rezone? That's my only reservation. Thank you.
Anyone else?
Good evening. My name's Lee Shepard. I live at 2309 Fox Meadows Circle. I sent some communication to you all, and I appreciate taking the time to look at it. I just wanted to reiterate a few things this evening. I won't be long. I did want you to know, I don't know if you've driven in Fox Meadows, there are a lot of signs out. I want you to know there are people there who are concerned. There's 43 yard signs at houses of people who are concerned. The communities sent a petition around. There were 199 signatures. That may not be a huge number, but those are people who are concerned. And I just want you to know we're concerned. It sounds like this has been in process for a number of months, and I appreciate the amount of time that staff and the city have worked on this project. I think it's important. It's an important project. I think the concern, and I'm speaking for my family who were here tonight, and I think I speak for some other neighbors. One of the problems is we didn't become aware that this was even happening until early May, when by law the city posted signs, and I think we followed the law, and you've done a good job of doing that. I think the concern is we didn't know this was happening, and that there have been meetings that we could have come to tell you how we feel, and so we're here now because this is the time that we can do it. I think looking back, it'd been great if the city had recognized that this is something that the community as a whole in that neighborhood would be concerned about. Maybe a focus group to talk about the concerns and maybe have some more input. But right now is the time for input, so I'm going to give it. So I want you to know, first of all, people are concerned. And my requests are simple. This option for multifamily housing is a concern. So I don't understand why the zone even includes it. Mr. Maloney doesn't want to build multifamily homes. We don't want them. So I don't know why there's a zone proposed that even includes it. Why is there not an option for something different? Why can't we come to some sort of collaboration that works for everyone? And I'm on the perimeter. So I just want you to know I have a concern. The lots proposed right behind my house, they're about half the size of what I'm on. I can see that on average the lots are pretty similar, but when I'm looking at my family, there's a bigger impact to us. So I'm just looking for some ways to ease that for those of us on the perimeter. I don't see anything in the PRD regulations that limit single-family house height. Can a 3-story home be built behind my home? I don't know the answer to that. Setbacks are pretty similar, but there's a slight difference. They're slightly smaller. So I'm not asking you to stop progress here tonight. I just want you to consider the little people out there who are going to be impacted here. I know you're trying to do what's best for Bristol, and I do appreciate your service and taking the time to listen to me. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is David Rowe. I live at Fox Meadows, 142 Violet Lane. I've been a resident of this neighborhood for 17 years, since 2005. I've lived in the city of Bristol for over 30 years. Last month, a planning commission meeting was held in order to debate the rezoning of Fox Meadows. There, a member of this commission, who is on the council tonight, made a flippant comment to the residents of the neighborhood that stated, "Sometimes change is hard." Well, what that counselor failed to realize is that the difficulty in this rezoning question lies solely in your hands. The residents of Fox Meadows have no say in the vote. Only you get the vote. So, for these residents, this change will only be hard if this council chooses it to be hard. If a new development around Fox Meadow remains zoned at R2, those developments will be consistent with those of the past 18 years. That's an easy change. That's what we're used to. However, if you choose the hard change, rezoning Fox Meadows to PRD, then the residents will be forced to deal with the repercussions of what gets developed. Not you, we. It seems sometimes change is hard is the exact message that this council needs to hear. The easy route for you will be giving the developer and his national construction company, so the money's not staying here, it's going outside, giving the national construction company everything that they want by rezoning. The hard route would be protecting the citizens of Bristol City and Fox Meadows, the people that you and this council are charged with protecting and keeping the zoning at R2. Which are you going to choose? A member of the councils have said they believe rezoning will be a benefit to the community. There's no guarantee in belief. Keeping the development at R2 is a fact, something that will ensure Fox Meadows continues to prosper as a desirable place to live. Despite all of this discussion, I have yet to hear anything about this rezoning that is a positive benefit to us, the current residents. You were elected to serve the best interest of the residents of this city. How is it in our best interest to make things hard? This council needs to protect the current residents of Fox Meadows from the slippery slope of PRD zoning. No matter the promises of the developer or any contract he has with a national construction company, nothing will stop him from changing that in the future, because you may not be here to vote on it. So if this council allows this rezoning to pass, then any current or future builder will be able to build whatever they want. If this council cannot 100% guarantee that this scenario will not occur after PRD rezoning, then you can guarantee it by voting no to the rezoning request, allowing Fox Meadows community to develop as it has for the last 18 years. So, council members, the statement that sometimes change is hard rests solely with you and your votes. Will you make the easy choice, giving the developer everything he wants, or will you make the hard choice to protect and serve the best interests of the residents that are you here to represent? Guarantee that Fox Meadows will continue to develop as it has for the last 18 years by voting no. Thank you.
Anyone else?
My name's Tristan Johnson. I live at 122 Mayapple Drive. We've owned that house since 2016. And you had mentioned the units per acre for PRD, 6 units per acre. I guess a unit is defined as just one building. So would it be 6? Could it potentially be 6 multifamily units per acre? Even the builder has said single-family units, and the definition of units and per acre is the potential for 6 multifamily units per acre. That's a big worry.
So the definition of dwelling unit is a complete dwelling unit for for one or more persons that has what's on the screen. So a permanent provision for living, sleeping, eating, cooking, and sanitation. The number of units is for PRD, the number of units is going to be regardless of whether it's a single home, a duplex, or 4 units. So a unit is going to be a unit. So in total, for this proposal, you have 176 single-family units. Now, there could be a different arrangement in a PRD that's in another area of town for a different developer, but a unit would be a unit. Now, the multifamily section of the PRD ordinance stipulates that the only type of multifamily that would be allowed is either a string of 4 units, like what's on the screen, or a building with 4 units, or a building with 6 units. But they can never exceed that total number of units based on the acreage of the land. So 176 273 units would be the absolute maximum just based on the pure acreage for 45 acres in the PRD. Right. So like now, I mean, the comparison is in R2, you could have 9 on 1 acre, but you can't have a multifamily unit. You can do duplexes in the R2, but a unit would be a unit, regardless of whether it's in a single building by itself or whether it's in a building with other units.
So I have a question. So based on that calculation, is that in the R2 you can allow duplexes, and on an acre you could have 4 very closely built duplex units? Yes, because there are 2, it's a duplex. So 4 times 2 is 8. and you could actually have as many as 9, but because duplexes are by 2s. So in the R2, you could have 4 duplex units built side by side.
But if you wanted that, it's so we can achieve higher density, why you want the zoning change in the first
Well,
place.
if you, I'm not going to debate this issue, but if you look at the R2 is the 9 units that are allowed per acre. So your density could potentially be greater in the R2 than in the PRD. Is that a true statement? Wait, is that a true statement?
If you're talking about pure density, yes, ma'am. So the total number of units. Now, you have different requirements in terms of the lot development in the R2, and you don't have the multifamily building allowance in the R2. But in terms of number of units, you have,
Just back to her question.
you have a higher aggregate number you could achieve.
My name's Darrell Castle, and I live at 204 Thistle Drive. Look at that slide. We're all here arguing over 40 homes. Under the R2, we got 136 lots. Under this proposed PRD, with the possibility of multifamily housing, you've got 176 lots. So that comes to 40 homes. You're going to risk multi-housing families in our subdivision for 40 lots. Is that not correct?
It's not correct.
Is my math right?
So that's a concept plan, right?
Oh, well.
So, no, so if something else different happens there, if nothing happens to the part that's being rezoned, asked to be rezoned, somebody could put the 9 units per acre, except that because of setbacks and things like that, it might not end up quite that high.
Yes, ma'am, but you just made my point. If something else happens, that's what we're concerned about, is something else happening. And the other thing that concerns me, which is, go ahead, I'm sorry.
That's if they keep the R2. So if you're, to me, it looks like you are better off for the number with PRD than you are with R2.
How so, ma'am?
So,
How so,
anyway.
ma'am? I'm sorry, how so?
Sheriff, Ms. Young will respond.
I was just going to interject one quick point. Is on the topic of multifamily, while the density units, the number still stays the same, the multifamily is going to carry with it the greater setbacks of 35 feet. It's also going to require the 20% green space requirement. And that's not to say that if you don't like multifamily, that's any better for you, but it's going to say that what he's got planned would have to drastically change in order to achieve multifamily. It couldn't just, his plan could not immediately switch to multifamily without some real changes.
Why couldn't?
Because he's got a green space requirement and.
It's very simple, but if we wanted to go multifamily, I would never do it under the PRD. It makes no sense. The 20% green space requirement would be 8.5 acres of the 45 acres. That would leave you a very minimal amount, and with additional setbacks, it doesn't pencil. If I was going to do multifamily, I'd be here asking for R3 right now. And one thing further would be that under the R2 presently, I wouldn't want to do this, but I mean, because I have no desire to, but the fact is that probably could get 130 duplexes in the R2 right now. So the question I would pose back, would you rather have 130 duplexes or 75 houses? All the single-family residential generate homes that are sold for the community. The duplexes, probably over 50% of them would be rental units.
Right.
So once again, trying to create houses that are needed for the area. Have no desire to do anything otherwise.
I would just like to say this, is I think, situations like this, they're hard. My parents had a farm, and people came in next to them, and they put single-family homes all over it, and my parents were terribly disappointed, and they owned the farm that was beside it. It's hard. But I think you have to look at all of your options. You talk about R2, you talk about the PRD. In A1, let's say that this thing wasn't annexed. In A1, you could end up with a substantial mobile home park. And then if you had the R2, as he just said, you could end up with just row after row of duplexes. Somebody is going to come in and develop this land. That's the bottom line. So in trying to look at this as to what the opportunity is, and I know it's hard to see it as an opportunity, but the PRD, and sometimes it's really hard to trust people. I know that's the issue here, is trust. We've got some other issues that we're involved in that I have a hard time trusting people. But in this situation, somebody's going to come in and develop this land. And this is, for all practical and intensive purposes, if you're concerned about a multifamily development, duplexes are a multifamily development. And he's made a very good point. So I think our planning commission, I think our planning staff have done everything that they possibly could to vet this. Mr. Malinay, he does have a contract. It's my understanding, he made mention of D.R. Horton. They predominantly do single-family homes. The topography of this land is at play. You've got the electrical lines that are coming in that are going to provide buffering. Correct, Mr. Malinay? Correct, Sheriff? So the electrical lines are going to provide natural buffering because you can't build under them and you've got to build so far away from them. The natural rise in that land, people, to come in with heavy machinery and to reduce that rise is an expense that people don't want. It takes away from the bottom line. So, we're sitting here tonight, and we have a choice. We can either leave it, it's A1, you run the risk of having a good-sized mobile home park next to your properties that would back up. There's no egress required for that. You run the risk of having somebody else, let's say Mr. Malinay finally gets tired of dealing with all this because he's been put up against the wall so many times. I'm just throwing this out there. Let's have a conversation. We had a project, a substantial project, that was going to go in Bristol. It would have been a wonderful addition. We had a developer get so frustrated, they walked out of the room. And that property has been broken up into single-family homes and duplexes right now. So we know we need the housing, long story short. And how do we get there? Well, we've got a man that's got a contract with the national builder, which you may or may not like, but they have committed to building single-family homes. If we say, oh, well, not going to do that, you could end up with a bunch of duplexes built behind your homes, and we wouldn't have any control over that. We have some natural buffering complexities that work to our advantage in this. You've got the electrical lines. There's a natural buffering. It's, how much is it, 75 feet from, pardon? 150 foot from lot line to lot line, or between the homes themselves? Okay, 150 feet. That's, you could lay a 15-story building over on its side. That's how far away that buffering will be because of the electrical lines. I get your point about coming in and out of the subdivision and that it's busy. I get that. Growth begets growth. At what rate, we can't guarantee, what's going to happen with that exactly. There aren't a lot of guarantees other than what you have, what can go on that property. And, push back hard enough on it, people aren't going to come here and develop. That's the bottom line. We, as a council, we've done everything we can legislatively. We've got sewer taps. What else do we have, Mr. Sora? What all have we put in place?
We've had the materials incentive package. Are you talking about just incentives for residential, the material incentives package? We've revisited a number of our zoning districts to try to remove impediments to development. We've explored alternative incentives that are new to the state. We've posed legislation that might provide additional incentives for residential developments. We've really put a number of tools in the toolbox that are currently existing and some that might come to fruition in the future to enhance the opportunity for developers to see Bristol as a place to invest.
And another step, Mayor Luttrell addressed this. If we annex and we extend our services, our sewer services in there, you're not going to be stacked up against a bunch of septic tanks. We've got to fly at 30,000 feet. And I get what you're saying. I've lived through it with my family. But at the end of the day, we've got to decide, do we not annex? It's a great opportunity for us to have additional residential housing. So do we not annex? The county then gets a plethora of mobile homes because that's the easiest, cheapest way to go, and you're backed up to a bunch of septic tanks with no egress, and the traffic's still going to be up against the wall. Or do we try to look at this thing pragmatically and say, okay, we've got 150 feet under the power lines that's going to separate this part and that part, and we're going to have two egress. That's what we're looking at. We're looking at, really, what is on the table. And it's being made out, and that's okay. But that we haven't really studied this. This is a hard decision. But we've had to look at the worst possible scenario. I think some of the thought is that the worst possible scenario is that it's multifamily housing. But the man has a contract, and I'm sure there are clawbacks in that contract, that if they don't do what they've said they're going to do, are there clawbacks in your contract?
If this is not passed, they're gone.
Yeah.
That ship's up.
And here's the thing, is that we've got other parcels of land that haven't come to us yet with other builders waiting to see what happens. And if we pass, that's it. We will have a really hard time getting residential developers to come into this community. We have worked for the past many years trying to set this community up to have residential developers to come in and be interested. And everything, right now, everything, whether we want to admit it or not, it's tied to population growth. You had the school budget. Do we have the numbers to keep going? Are we going to have the property tax advantage? Because what we're learning is that you've got to have volume, and you've got to have home prices at a certain volume. And as the home prices go up, and as the population goes up, guess what goes down? The property tax. And we experienced that last year. So we've been all over this thing. I know that you don't trust this situation. We have to trust it at some point to be able to move the community forward. The man's told us he's got a contract with D.R. Horton. They're going to only build single-family homes, which it has in a PRD has a lesser density than an R2. And bringing that A1 in, that's gold. That's gold. And I know you may not see it like that. But that's what we're having to try to deal with.
Ma'am, I don't have a problem with you annexing that part, but when you get through, you'll have over 300 homes going out 2 exits. Mr. Malley has 55 feet of road frontage, don't you, Jerome, on the other property you just bought?
You basically have 308 homes out of 2 exits, which the original trigger was 150, so basically you're right at the maximum amount.
Why can't you add a 3rd exit on the 22 acres and let it come around? I sent you all that suggestion in the email, and nobody responded back. To give us 3 exits instead of 2, maybe eliminate some of the traffic.
None of the property borders any of the other ways out. Or it's not possible.
At least look at it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay, see it? Have one more here.
I do just want to say it's difficult for us as homeowners coming into this meeting and somewhat realizing that a decision had already been made and that our voices might not have been heard. That's a little disappointing to us. I've personally seen 4 houses go up for sale in our subdivision since all this came out, and I foresee that number to rise quite a bit. I'm not saying that's good or bad, and it's hearsay. I mean, it's just going to be whatever it is. So I guess I just wish there was some method in place that allowed us, or that allowed you all, to have the site plan approved when this zoning was approved, because I don't think any of us have any trouble or have any problem with what's being currently designed. We just worry that the moment it's rezoned, a new design comes in. And I just wish there was something in place that would kind of force that to happen. And I know now's not the time for that, and there's nothing we can do about it now. But that's just something I just like to bring to your all's attention. Wish that was something that could be done. Yeah, so thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
My name's Laura Vance, and I live at 209 Thistle Drive. They pretty much have mentioned everything that is my concern. We moved to Thistle Drive in this year, just recently, and we lived in a subdivision that was like small lots, and we moved to a bigger subdivision with bigger lots, family-oriented, and I feel like, I understand his point of wanting to build our houses, because I know there's I work at the clerk's office, and I see probably 30 families moving from out of state to Tennessee. I know we need homes to put them in, but I just, Daryl even mentioned a 3rd entrance and exit would be awesome as well, because traffic through there, we have kids out there playing, and I think that's my really big concern, because is the kids and the rezoning. I kind of understand the PRD, but I don't. I just wish it could stay R2. And but I just wanted to voice my opinion on this, and I hope y'all don't vote for it. But I understand y'all probably already made your decision. So thank you.
I want y'all to know that I'm pretty new to council, and I can tell you that, your concerns are valid, and I understand your hesitation and your concerns over multifamily units. I just want you to know, I think that's true of all the council, from listening to them and work sessions and really trying to dig into this. What Councilwoman Powers talked about, it is that, looking at the whole needs of our community, and at the same time weighing your concerns. And it is it's a big ask, right, Mr. Maloney? It's a huge ask today to ask people to trust and to take someone at their word, which is what you all are being asked to do, what we're all being asked to do. And that's what we're looking at you for, right? I mean, you've said multiple times that you're going to build single-family homes. And all any of us have in this room is our word. It's all we've ever got. I mean, we can put policies in place and laws in place, but we know that those things can be tweaked and turned. We know enough of that. And so, you know, you're on the hook, really. This council's on the hook. And it's this is a tough for all of us. Our community is growing, and we need it to grow. We heard from Dr. Tudor earlier. We know that rooftops equal tax dollars. Those tax dollars help us to pay for our kids and help us to pay for SROs. We want to see dedicated SROs in all of our schools, and for us to pay for those. And that's going to require some adjustments with our taxes. We know that, and we're willing to do those things. And this is a tough ask on all of us, and not an easy road for any of us, and especially on the folks that live in Fox Meadows. I did drive through your neighborhood. I drove those streets. I've given a lot of thought about it, and so I just want you to know this isn't something that we're taking lightly or not taking your concerns in consideration. I mean, that's the truth, but it's a tough ask, and we are looking at you to be a man of your word. That's all you got, right?
That's correct.
Mr. Mayor, this is out of order.
Would you please come to the podium? We need your name and everything. And this will be the last person.
Sorry if you couldn't hear. My name's Andrew. I'm from 209 Thistle Drive with Laura. The question that I have, or the statement that I'd like to make in regards of whatever the decision gets made, whether it's voted one way or another, we know that the houses are going to be there. It could or could not be the duplexes, things like that. My question or my concern on whatever would go forward would be, do we get notified? Do we understand what's going to happen before it happens? Will it just happen and there it is, and you know, all that good stuff? Not talking about the vote of the change. I'm talking about the development as it occurs and what that development is. As a citizen of the city and as a citizen of the neighborhood, I would just like to have that in a more ahead of time situation to know, you know, what's being built behind me before it happens, so that I'm completely aware. Thank you.
Can I respond to that? The preliminary subdivision plat, which requires approval by the Planning Commission, will be submitted to staff probably early next week. I don't think that's sufficient time to circulate it for comment back for the June 16th Planning Commission meeting, but if you'll show up for the July 18th Planning Commission meeting, you will see the plat, which in all substance is going to look 99.9% like the one you see, other than making tweaks that staff request to meet requirements of the city. So July 18th, and you'll see what's submitted.
Ms. Young, is there anything from the city's part that we would give for notification?
Can't hear you.
Is there anything that you would, from the city's part, notification in addressing the question that was asked?
So with the next step, so obviously, depending on what happens tonight with this vote, there'll be a second reading public hearing on the rezoning request for the July 12th council meeting. The next step after that will be the plat process, and that rests with the Planning Commission. We don't have a required advertising requirement for that. We do always put our Planning Commission agendas online. That Planning Commission meeting is the third Monday of the month, and I'd be more than happy, though, if you don't want to necessarily watch the website every month, for somebody to call me and say, hey, can you tell me if anything's on the agenda? Like Mr. Maloney said, our next planning commission meeting is on the 20th. It's probably too quick to get his plat on that agenda just because there's a little bit more work to do for them to get it submitted. There's some work to do on the city side to review it. So I anticipate that July 18th date is when the plat will be on the planning commission agenda. But I'm always happy if anybody wants to give me a call to just check in on if that's on the agenda. I'll be happy to share that with you. But the agendas are always posted online, but I tend to forget to check websites sometimes. So like I said, I'd be happy to develop a line of communication with the neighborhood, so y'all could feel free to call me anytime you wanted to check to see what's on the agenda. And then once that preliminary plat is approved, you're certainly welcome to a copy of that. That's a public document that we could give you all a copy of.
And your phone number is?
New phone number 423-764-0343. So I finally memorized it, but my email address cyoung@bristoltn.org.
And I'd just like to say this. I am passionate about your feelings. I've seen situations like this where we had a much better opportunity that we passed on and ended up with something much less than what we could have had. And that's the reason behind my comments and my passion this evening is that, and it's not to say that I've thought a lot about this. I've driven through Fox Meadows. I've driven down Beaver Creek Road. It's just, we just have to reach out, and Mr. Maloney has given us a plan, and he'll have the plat, as he said, July 18th.
So are we making comments before we have a motion, or I'll be glad to do it now?
Go ahead, we're totally out of order. Go ahead, let's finish it up.
So, yeah, I just wanted to apologize if my comments were taken as condescending or as flippant, and I did talk about change being hard because I know it's hard from personal experience also, so that is heartfelt. I too have driven through. I also over the weekend drove to Johnson City to look at a D.R. Horton development. So tried to do homework, tried to look at what's in front of us, both for this and the big picture. I do think that we can do some reflection and look at our communication. We do follow the letter of the law, but times change, and so maybe we need to look at different kinds of communication. So some of that might be a positive. Maybe it doesn't help where y'all are, but it's going to help the next folks who want to understand what's going on and be able to communicate. So I think there's several takeaways from, and I also wanted to appreciate the folks who did send emails that were very thoughtful, were also very courteous and respectful, and I really appreciate that. And I've highlighted some of the ideas that we will look at.
Okay. We'll move on. Would any member of council, is there a motion to take action on this item?
I move that we approve this ordinance to amend the zoning map, Bristol, by designating certain properties PRD.
That's 22.9, correct?
22.8.
22.8, I'm sorry, I'm looking at the bottom one. I'll second it.
Okay, Mary Lee, ready for a vote, please.
Towers,
Yes.
Luttrell,
Yes.
Robin,
Yes.
Yes.
The next item on the agenda is the first reading of ordinance 22-10, amending the appropriation of funds and budget for the fiscal year beginning July 1, 2021 through June 30, 2022. Mr. Shore, would you please summarize ordinance 22-10?
This is 22.9.
Right. It's supposed to be 22-9.
Yeah.
We're on 22-9.
Excuse, I'm sorry, 20,
Yeah, 22-9 would be the item that we're on this time. This is the companion ordinance to 22-8. This establishes the zoning designation for the recently annexed portion.
sorry.
of the-
Okay, does any member of council have a question for staff?
No.
Have a motion to take action.
I make a motion that we approve 22-9.
I second that we approve ordinance 22-9 to designate the zoning of property newly annexed into the city of Bristol, Tennessee.
Any member of council like to discuss it?
Well, I did want to note, and I know a lot of people have left, but the traffic is part of the review. Is that correct, Ms. Young? That traffic is looked at during all the review. It's also on us to pay attention and continue doing some of those studies for road improvements. So when there's growth, we have to pay attention and look at what needs to be done to accommodate that growth. Same thing for growth with the school system, et cetera. We have to look at that to be sure that we are accommodating growth. Thank you.
Okay. Anyone in the audience like to address council on this matter? Okay, I believe we're ready to take a vote. Mary Lee?
Powers,
Yes.
Luttrell,
Yes.
Firehouse,
Yes.
Yes.
Now we'll move on to the next item, the budget. Next item on the agenda is first reading of our ordinance 22-10, amending the appropriation of funds and budget for the fiscal year beginning July 1, 2021 through June 30, 2022. Mr. Sora.
Yes, Mayor. Ordinance 22-10 is largely a housekeeping measure that we're required to do by statute this time every year to address either an increase in revenues or expenditures in a variety of funds. You see up there the several funds related to municipal functions, also several funds related to school system functions. Rather than go through all of those, I will highlight a handful of those. The general fund, for example, is scheduled it to increase to $29,435,932. This is largely related to unplanned legal expenses related to the Bristol, Virginia landfill. The general purpose school fund is to increase by $1.9 million, and that's just due to the timing of capital projects, increased expenditures associated with when those capital projects hit the various fiscal years. The Chapter 420 fund, as council is aware, tracks the revenues that are shared from the state sales tax increment related to the tourism district at Exit 74, and this reflects an additional increase in revenue of $2.18 million that's distributed to both the developer and the city. Other funds, such as the solid waste fund, would increase by $309,000. And that's attributable to higher operational costs, such as equipment repair costs, fuel costs, and so forth. State Street Aid Fund increased by a similar amount related to the increased costs in paving associated with the basis of asphalt is oil, and where those prices have gone since the budget was originally contemplated. So with that, we also have transfer revisions that just reflect higher transfers amount based on the various services that are there. If approved on first reading tonight, we will need to schedule a called meeting. I would like to do this prior to our work session later this month to consider this matter on second reading, and I'll talk a little bit more about the timing of that during the city manager comments later this evening.
Okay, does any member of council have questions?
Move to approve.
Second. Ordinance 22-10.
Thank you.
Okay, I believe we're ready for a vote, Mary Lee.
Powers,
Yes.
Luttrell,
Yes.
Firehouse,
Yes.
Yes.
Next item on the agenda is second reading of ordinance 22-4, amending the city zoning map by designating property at 2216 Volunteer Parkway as B3 General Business. Staff summarized this issue during the public hearing earlier this evening. Does any member of council have a question for staff? Hearing none, is there a motion to take action on this item?
I move that we approve ordinance 22-4.
I second ordinance 22-4 to amend the zoning map of Bristol, Tennessee by designating certain property as B3.
Would any member of council like to discuss 22-4?
I'll just say that I will vote no, because I feel like it should reserve, some of it is residential.
Okay, the public had an opportunity to comment on this issue during the public hearing, so I believe we're ready to vote. Mary Lee?
Powers,
Yes.
Luttrell,
Yes.
Firehoppen,
No.
Yes.
Next item on the agenda is reading of ordinance 22-5, amending Chapter 2 of the city's zoning ordinance as it relates to special adaptive reuse permits. Staff summarized this issue during the public hearing earlier this evening. Does any member of council have a question for staff?
I move to approve ordinance 22-5 on the special adaptive reuse permits.
Seconded. Would any member of council like to discuss ordinance 22-5?
We've worked on it a long time. Planning Commission's worked on it, planning staff. We're excited.
The public had an opportunity to comment on this issue during the public hearing, so I believe we're ready for a vote. Mary Lee, please call the roll.
Powers,
Yes.
Luttrell,
Yes.
Firehoppen,
Yes.
Yes.
The next item on our agenda is the second reading of ordinance 22-6, amending Chapter 3 of the city's zoning ordinance as it relates to the planned residential district. Staff summarized this issue during the public hearing earlier this evening. Does any member of council have a question for staff? Hearing none, is there a motion to take action on this item?
I move to approve ordinance 22-6 to amend Chapter 3 residential districts by replacing existing Section 308 PRD District Planned Residential in its entirety.
I'll second it. The public had an opportunity to comment on this issue during the public hearing, so I believe we're ready for a vote. Mary Lee, please call the roll.
Powers,
Yes.
Luttrell,
Yes.
Firehoppen,
Yes.
Yes.
Next, we have second reading on ordinance 22-7, adopting a budget and appropriating funds for the fiscal year July 1, 2022 through June 30, 2023. Mr. Soares summarized this issue during the public hearing earlier this evening. Does any member of council have a question for staff?
I don't have a question for staff. Would this be an appropriate time to amend our budget?
Yes, it is.
Okay.
We do need a motion first on the actual resolution. and then
Okay.
we can-
I make a motion.
I'll second it for approval to adopt a budget and appropriate funds. 22-23.
Now, if you wish to amend the resolution, you can move to amend.
Okay, I would like to amend ordinance 22-7. Danielle, am I right?
Yes, yes, Councilwoman.
In light of current societal concerns and out of an abundance of caution, respect, and concern for the precious children of the Bristol, Tennessee schools and their beloved teachers, supporting staff and administration, this motion is to return an additional $136,000 of the taxpayers' monies, as opposed to $236,000 as presented on first reading of May of 2022, above and beyond. Let's see. To be deposited and allocated at the discretion of the Bristol, Tennessee Board of Education to the General Purpose School Fund. Additionally, the City of Bristol, Tennessee will retain and allocate $100,000, part of the original $236,000 as presented on first reading May 2022, until such time that additional grant funding in support of SROs is secured. When and if said grant funding specific to SROs is secured, the monies received up to $100,000 will be allocated or forwarded to the Bristol, Tennessee School Board for offsetting costs related to full-time SRO employment. The City of Bristol, Tennessee will secure the hiring and appointment of 2 additional full-time SROs to serve in 2 additional Bristol, Tennessee City School Systems elementary schools, which are currently either unattended or have only part-time SROs, in collaboration with the current 3 full-time SROs funded by the Bristol, Tennessee Board of Education, thus providing a full-time SRO in each of the 5 elementary schools, 2 full-time officers funded by the City of Bristol, Tennessee in the elementary schools, and 3 full-time officers funded by the Bristol, Tennessee City Schools. Furthermore, let it be noted that in addition to the new 2 elementary SROs that the Bristol, Tennessee City Council will fund, the Bristol, Tennessee City Council affirms its continued financial support of the 1 full-time SRO officer assigned to Tennessee High School and the 1 full-time SRO officer assigned to the Tennessee Middle School. The Bristol, Tennessee City Council, through this motion, also affirms its continued financial support of all training and the equipping of all SRO officers assigned to the Bristol, Tennessee schools. Therefore, in total, the Bristol, Tennessee City Council supports the financial funding of 4 SRO officers, 2 assigned full-time to 2 elementary schools, 1 full-time to Tennessee High School, and 1 full-time to Tennessee Middle School, along with all training and equipping of SROs. The aforementioned funding, in collaboration with the Bristol, Tennessee School Board funding of 3 full-time elementary school SROs, will provide a full-time SRO in each of our elementary schools, 1 full-time at Tennessee High Middle School and 1 full-time at Tennessee High School. The motion in its brevity, or specifically, is to return an additional $136,000 of the taxpayers' monies, as opposed to the original $236,000, and I'll expand on this in just a minute, as presented on first reading May 2022. So we had originally in first reading, do we need to vote on that, or can I talk a little bit about it?
Is there a second for the motion?
Second.
Okay, so now we can talk a little bit. What this will actually do is the school system will receive the initial $136,000. We will retain $100,000 to provide a bridge for these 2 officers so that they can be hired and put into place, receive SRO training, which my understanding is in July, or the opportunity for SRO training. Chief Austin? Okay. So that as of August 1st, when the children come back to school, there will be SROs in all of the buildings. I do understand that Viking Academy is still in play. There is the hope, my understanding is that there will be monies there for an SRO officer. So it's my understanding that Chief Austin is working diligently through the competitive grant process for additional monies for SROs. So in my mind, the way to look at this is that this action, should it be approved, would provide the bridge for all of our schools other than Viking Academy, which we think is going to have its separate funding. So that all of the schools as of August 1st will have that funding. It's ideal that, in my mind, that if we were to be able to secure $100,000 in SRO-specific grant funding, that money would come to the school system. You have $180,000, I think, is what's being allocated for SROs. I may or may be off a few dollars. But then the $100,000 from any grant monies that we can get would offset the $180,000 that the school system has set aside. And then the monies that are not specific to SROs can be moved out of that back into the general purpose school fund. So through a series of financial movements, you should be able to come back close to, with approved grant funding, the original amount at first reading. And that, through this motion, is the intent is that while we don't have grant funding yet, and to be honest, there is no guarantee that we will get it, but there is a huge effort being made, and I know that y'all are aware of this, so that think we all agree the most important thing right now is to have our schools fully covered with school resource officers. And this gives us a vehicle just for edification. We are reimbursed, is my understanding, on the payments paid towards the school resource officers' allocations. It's not one lump sum back and forth, right? So hopefully, and it's all hopefully, we've got to have hope with one another and trust one another that we're all working to our greatest degree of diligence. Hopefully we'll have secured SRO funding through a grant so that these monies can be put into place. So the past couple of weeks have been heartbreaking. And we all are touched to our very core over what's happening in our country. And we have to assure that all of our children receive the same degree of protection and to the best of our abilities that we're able to provide SRO officers. So this would get the ball rolling so that we could try to hire the officers to be placed into the schools. By law, Chief Austin, SRO officers are not mandated to have SRO training, but it is preferred, correct? Okay. So we have an opportunity the first part of July to get all of this going. And the devil is in the details. There will be a new MOU, I'm sure, which is just good. It just gives a good framework. So that's it.
Okay, I believe we got a second. Mary Lee, I believe we're ready to vote.
Powers,
Yes.
Wetzel,
Yes.
Fryerson,
Yes.
Yes.
This brings us to the,
Just to clarify, I'm sorry, Mr. Mayor.
That was the amendment.
That was a positive vote on the amendment.
Okay.
And so now you have to vote on the actual motion to approve the budget ordinance itself.
all right.
Motion to approve.
No, we already
We
have
already
the
have a motion. Where
We're
are
ready
we?
to vote.
Ready to vote.
Oh.
Okay. Mary Lee?
Call again.
Powers,
Yes.
Wetzel,
Yes.
Fryerson,
Yes.
Yes.
Now this brings us to the consent agenda. Mr. Sorb, will you please read the items on tonight's consent agenda?
Yes, Mayor, I'd be glad to. We have for consideration the minutes of the May 3rd, 2022 City Council meeting, minutes of the May 24th, 2022 City Council work session, Resolution 22-44 approving an agreement with the Tennessee Department of Transportation for maintenance of state highways, Resolution 2245 awarding a bid for the purchase of a K-9 for the police department, Resolution 2246 awarding a bid for pavement markings, Resolution 2247 awarding a proposal for reinsurance for the self-funded health insurance plan, Resolution 2248 authorizing payment to public entity partners for legal services, Resolution 2249 adopting Amendment 3 to the City of Bristol, Tennessee Group Health Plan, Resolution 2250 authorizing payment to Troutman Pepper Sanders LLP for legal fees, Resolution 2251 authorizing an award of an operation and maintenance contract services contract for the Bristol Regional Wastewater Treatment Plant, and Resolution 2252 authorizing entry into an agreement for neighborhood mapping services.
Okay, would any member of council like any item to be removed from the consent agenda?
Move to approve.
Second. Okay, Mary Lee, I believe we're ready for roll call.
Powers,
Yes.
Wetzel,
Yes.
Fryerson,
Yes.
Yes.
This moves us to the city manager's report.
Yes, Mayor, let me find it here. Okay. As I mentioned earlier, when we were addressing ordinance 22-10 regarding the amendment of our fiscal 2022 budget, we do need a second reading of that. And I'd like to have that as a brief call business meeting where we conduct a public hearing and then consideration on second reading prior to our work session. And our work session is currently scheduled for Tuesday, June 28th. That's easy enough in and of itself. But during our last work session, Vice Mayor Turner asked if we could consider moving our work sessions from 11 a.m. to 4 p.m. So we need to have that conversation amongst council. Once you determine the starting date for that work session, and then I think subsequent work sessions, then we'll publicly notice the public hearing as well as the Second Amendment.
Is that something we should discuss tonight?
It is, yes.
Okay.
Yes.
I was on the phone that day. I would like to see us move our work session later to 6 rather than 4, and this meeting to 6, so that both of the meetings are at the same time, so you don't have two different times and they're like, you keep it on the same day, but it's 6 rather than 4. 4 seems too early to me. 7 feels late to me. So that's my thought on that. I'm all for moving the time to later, but I think it should be 6 for the work session. My 2 cents.
I'm okay with 4, 5, 6. But I think it'd be good if we started in July. That's a new fiscal year, kind of new, whatever, that we keep it where it is for June, and then that gives the public more time. We've heard communication is an issue. If we're going to change it, get it out there in advance, more in advance, not just what's required by law. So, but we need to decide what time. We have 4, we have 6.
I think the consistency of time is a good thing.
6.
Let's pick a time and stick to it, and 6 works.
I like 6.
And Vince, if you're watching, I hope 6 works.
To be clear, is this 6 for both meetings then, or just the work session? What's the consensus of council on that?
I would recommend that they're both at the same time. That way there's no question. You just know that the meetings are at 6. And they're, on the 1st and 4th Tuesday at 6 o'clock. Just sort of consistency.
Wow.
Change is hard, Margaret.
Then definitely we wait till July to make that change. So, and actually, do we make that change for July for a city council meeting? It is the second week in July.
If you're going to hold at 11, and I think that's what I heard, that you would hold for 11 for the June work session, perhaps we put this on the agenda for the June work session to fully debate and reach a consensus on the starting time for both the work session and our business meeting.
Is this going to require a vote? Because if it does, we could talk, it could be on that called meeting
It could
agenda.
be. You're absolutely right, and that would be the appropriate place to do that. So we'll stay with 11 o'clock. We will have a called meeting at 11, immediately followed by our work session.
Great.
So, okay. Also, I'd like to express my appreciation for our budget team. I know Holly Varan is in the back, Mary Lee Williams as our city recorder. Also, Krista Bird and Tim Beavers. We can't forget Tim and the hard work that they put in, as well as all of our department head and staff contributing to the development of that document. As I've said with council before, this is singularly the most important public policy decision that you'll make over the course of the year. It outlines our plan of work for the next year, as well as commits the financial resources. Also, I'd like to congratulate Mike Carrier and our fire department. They passed the first hurdle toward the reaccreditation process from the Commission of Fire Accreditation International. A team of evaluators spent time with our fire staff and in all of our stations during the last week of May, and they've made a favorable recommendation for accreditation to the board. Our fire team will travel to appear before that board in mid-August, and hopefully we'll come back with successfully completing the final hurdle. I know Councilwoman Fire Robin, when she served at mayor, was with that group in Charlotte when they received their first accreditation. There's truly only a handful of departments across the state, or even across the country, that reach this designation. And as you saw tonight with Captain Mears, it's truly the heart and soul of our department. Our staff there and the dedication they have, and I certainly commend them on their efforts. And then our regular business meeting, which would normally be the first Tuesday of July 5th, due to the July 4th holiday, we're sliding that back a week to July 12th, and we'll pick a time. So those conclude my comments, Mayor.
Anyone else?
It's late, but that accreditation was intense, so just really appreciate, and hopefully getting through this one, then it'll be smooth sailing in the future too. I think the first one after the original is probably pretty tough. So anyway, I wanted to invite people. There's Juneteenth celebration, June 18th from 4 to 8 at Cumberland Park. There'll be music, different service agencies will be there with information, et cetera. A couple things to note. I just heard an article, teen employment is the highest it's been in 70 years. So no wonder it's hard to get teens for jobs. They have their pick of employment these days. That's pretty awesome overall. There was something else I was going to say about youth. Anyway, also for communication, I think sometimes it doesn't happen. Memorial Day celebration, Harvey Anderson and Richard Ball do a great job with others planning that, but the word doesn't always get out. So it was Cumberland Park at noon on Memorial Day, and that's all that I'll say. So other than, Governor Lee's working on SRO. Probably we'll see more grants available, and we hope that that might be something that goes into the budget, or it's one of those grants that you get as long as you submit it and do the right paperwork or whatever. So we'll hope that that does help out, and I'll stop there.
I'm not going to belabor, because if this meeting had started at 6, it would be an hour earlier. No, I do want to say I'm glad that we were able to start really thinking about SROs in all the schools. Having a son at Tennessee High and my wife at Avoca, I can't tell you, they're just invaluable. And I want to see us, this is a good first step, what we're doing here, and I'm really grateful for council's work on that. My hope is that in the future, that becomes part of our normal city budget, and we have 7 dedicated officers, or 8, whatever we need. We don't ever have to circle back to this again, but it's just we fund it, and not even have to worry about grants. I think people in this community, if it requires a tax increase, we'll pay it, whatever it takes to keep our kids and as safe as we can keep them. And I know Chief Austin, you guys do an amazing job of building relationships with kids within our school system. And my wife talks about that, seeing the officer there, really engaged with kids and families, and building that trust and relationship, and providing that care as well as the safety aspect of it. So I'm really excited about that.
I'll just also add, I know lots of school systems are doing a lot. We've been doing stuff with bullying and now with ACEs and trauma, and all that is so critically important, that kids who need support, who need attention, and that's also with Chief Austin's immersion in the community and getting more community policing. That's more caring, responsible adults that do make differences in kids' lives. And I think that holds more of our hope than anything else, is for our young people to have hope and feel good about themselves and their futures forward. So glad to see what our school system is doing along those lines. It's critical. And Viking Academy is part of that, helping kids who struggle.
I'll just add this. The first step towards a really good, great education is having those basic and essential needs met. and to be able to walk into a building and feel safe and secure, and as an educator, to be able to devote yourself to your classroom, your students at that time, and to not live in a world, have to live in a constant world of, film over your windows and doors locked. And it's the world that we live in, but I truly feel that we can lessen the burden, and it's critical for our students to be able to get out of whatever has gotten them there, walk into the building and feel safe. Because for a lot of our students, that school building is the only place where they feel absolutely safe.
I'm going to be real quick. Appreciate Commissioner Stanley and Commissioner Aker for hanging in here with us tonight. It's always good to see you here. And just sincerely appreciate the entire staff and all the hard work you guys do every day. And don't forget, some of us got to be up bright and early down at the airport in the morning at the networks meeting. So. Go ahead, use attendance. Go ahead.
Commissioner Roth was here yesterday, and ACT, ACT Company, is bringing in excess of 300 jobs. Congratulations to our economic development team, Tom, Matt, and Southern Networks Partnership. And so we continue to have these announcements, and we've got several more to come. Thank you.
And just real quickly, the Commissioner of Tourism is in town. I've been invited to a dinner tomorrow night with him, so we'll see what that's all about. So anyway, adjourned.